I fought men without flinching. But behind that door, I already knew it was coming. Because 30 years ago, I lost everything on a night just like this.
The last thing I heard was my son's voice. Not the voice I wanted, not the word I needed. He stood at the foot of the hospital bed, 33 years old, jaw tight, eyes dry. He looked at the machines keeping me alive and said what he came to say. He told me that even if I died, he would never acknowledge me as his father. He told me his mother would never forgive me. My unborn sister, he said, would never forgive me either. He would not take a single cent of my inheritance. I could take my money to the grave. Then he turned and left the intensive care unit. No hesitation, no backward glance. I was 50 years old and dying. My body was already gone, but there was something left, some stubborn scrap of soul that refused to dissolve. It clung to one word, Dad, just once, just that. But the room was empty, the monitor screamed, and the last thread of my consciousness shrieked into the void. Son, don't go. Then a child cried, not the grown man who had just walked out, a toddler, close, real, terrified. My eyes shot open and I jolted upright on a heated brick bed, a Kong, the kind we had in the village. Before me stood a boy, 3 years old, tears pouring down his face, mouth open in a wail. Mom, Mom, Mom! The door curtain lifted. A woman walked in, one hand on her swollen belly, the other reaching for the child. She squatted beside him and whispered that Mom was here, not to be afraid. Li Juan, my wife, dead 30 years, 8 months pregnant, standing right in front of me. She pulled our son's hand and glanced at me. A flicker of panic crossed her eyes, the way you look at something that might hurt you. Then she fled the room, dragging the child with her. The curtain swung shut, and a blast of winter air cut through my chest like a blade. From the kitchen, I heard my son's small voice. Dad is fierce. Dad is bad. I stood in that room and let the memories crash over me. 2 lifetimes, separating cleanly like oil and water. The dilapidated courtyard, 2 adobe houses, snow falling thick and silent beyond the doorframe. A string of firecrackers went off somewhere in the village. It was the 23rd of the 12th lunar month, 1992. The day they sent the kitchen god back to heaven. The day before my pregnant wife died. In my first life, at this exact hour, I was sleeping off a drunk. Debt collectors arrived that evening. Li Juan gave them the last 100 yuan we had, begging them to leave. They wouldn't. They took our grain, our coal, the cabinets from the house. They wanted to tear down the rafters. Li Juan rushed at them, and they shoved her to the ground. She fell hard, her spine bruised. The mountain roads were buried in snow. No hospital, difficult labor, mother and baby both dead. I could have stopped it. If I had gotten off that Kang and fought, killing them would not have been excessive. But I hid in the room. I let it happen. Now I was back, standing on my own 2 feet in the kitchen doorway, watching my terrified wife and my terrified son huddled by the stove. I wanted to rush over and crush them both in my arms, laugh and sob and tell them everything. But the man who lived in this body yesterday had screamed curses at his child and demanded money from his wife. If I ran at them now, they would only see a drunk lunging. So I squatted down, opened my arms, made my voice as soft as it would go. Son, come. Dad will hug you. Li Juan's voice shook with pleading. She begged me not to lose my temper, said Wenwen had only gone in to cover me with a blanket because he thought I was cold. My 3-year-old son pressed against his mother's leg and whispered, Papa isn't fierce. Don't be fierce to Mom. That sentence went through me like a nail. I pressed my fist against my chest and gritted my teeth. How much of a monster had I been to make them this afraid? I swallowed the pain and smiled again. I told Li Juan we should send the kitchen god off together, set off some firecrackers, celebrate the little new year as a family. She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. I tore the kitchen god portrait from the stove wall with both hands, carefully, the way you handle something that matters. I asked for the offerings, 6 little cakes. Li Juan told me they were covered in the big pot. I took them out, arranged them in 2 stacks of 3, set up the small incense burner. I lit the incense and called my son over. Wenwen walked to me slowly, still afraid, glancing at his mother for permission. I bent down and handed him the incense stick. He was too small to reach the burner, so I lifted him up, his tiny body against my chest, and leaned forward so he could push the stick into the sand. He struggled with it for a long time. Then it held. Dad, fun. I kissed his forehead. Then I knelt. Wenwen, small and warm in my arms, knelt with me. I struck a match and burned the kitchen god portrait. The flame licked up and turned to ash. My head went down and did not come back up for a long time. My shoulders shook. I bit my lip until it bled. 30 years of failure, 30 years of poison, and here was my son in my arms, alive, calling me Dad. Son, I said, Dad is sorry. Dad is sorry for you. Dad is sorry for Mom. Dad was wrong. Li Juan saw every bit of it, heard every word. Her face went blank. In all their years of marriage, He Ning had never held his son and wept, had never once said he was wrong. Wen reached up with his small hand and wiped the tears from my cheek. "Dad, don't cry. Don't be mean to Mom." I kissed him and stood. It was almost evening. They were coming. In the kitchen, I told Li Juan to stay inside with Wen. I told them not to come out, no matter what they heard. She started to argue, and I closed the door behind me. Then, because I was terrified she would run out and put herself between me and those men, I took the lock from the windowsill and hung it on the bolt. The four-pronged iron fork stood in the corner of the courtyard. I picked it up, felt the weight of it in both hands. Solid steel, the kind you use to pitch hay, or to kill a man if you swing it hard enough. I walked out of the courtyard, slid down the small slope on the packed snow, and planted myself in the middle of the road at the river bend. I waited 10 minutes. A minivan crawled toward me through the snow and stopped. Yang Biao climbed out, thick yellow coat, warm hat, the kind of man who never sweats because he makes other people do the bleeding. 3 or 4 of his men followed. He saw me and raised an eyebrow. He asked if I knew they were coming. I said I did. He asked if I had the money. I said I didn't. Something in my voice made him look at me differently. He glanced at the iron fork, then at my eyes, and for the first time, he looked uncertain. He was right to be uncertain. The man standing in front of him was not the drunk who had hidden in a room. That man was dead. Yang Biao was a calculator. He had let me win small, then lose big, then offered me 1,000 yuan loan and let me lose that too. Then the IOU. 1,000 yuan in 1992 was a death sentence for a farming family. He had engineered every step, but he was a businessman, not a fighter. He measured risk. I gripped the fork and stared at him with the eyes of a man who had already watched everything he loved die once and would burn the world before it happened again. "Yang Biao," I said, "I owe you money. I will pay you back." He extended his hand and asked for it. "Not now." One of his men stepped forward, cursing. "They would come into my courtyard," he said. "Tear down my roof." The fork swung horizontal, 4 steel prongs pointing at Yang Biao's throat. I roared from a place deeper than my lungs. "Dare to take 1 step into my courtyard, and I will kill you." The word kill left my mouth like a gunshot. Yang Biao froze. He actually stepped backward. His tone softened immediately. He told me to calm down, said we could talk. I took a step forward. The fork did not waver. He put his hands up. Behind him, one of his men whispered that 4 of them could handle me. Yang Biao stopped the man with a raised palm. He could see it. The tough fear the reckless, and the reckless fear those who will die before they back down. I had the eyes of a man with nothing left to lose. Because I had already lost it all once. He gave me 5 more days, until the morning of the 30th. Then he would come back, and if I could not pay, he would show no mercy. I told him to get lost. They got in the minivan and drove away through the pressed snow. My hands shook. My body shook. The crisis was delayed, not eliminated. But Li Juan was safe. The baby was safe. 5 days. I could work with 5 days. I ran back up the slope and into the courtyard. From inside, I heard my son crying and the door banging. Li Juan was shouting, demanding to know why I had locked them in. I pulled the lock off and the door flew open. Wen was sobbing. Li Juan wiped a tear and roared at me for locking the door when she needed to cook. I took the flour basin from her hands. "Wife, don't move. You're about to give birth. What if something goes wrong? I'll make dinner." Her mouth opened and nothing came out. Could he even cook? The answer was pulled noodles with sauce. Not elegant, but I could do it. I kneaded dough on the cutting board, and while it rested, I thought about meat. Wen leaned against the board with his big eyes and whispered, "Dad, eat meat noodles." My son's hair was slightly yellow and thin. His body was a gust of wind away from falling over. His hands were cracked from the cold. One split after another on the backs of his knuckles. My wife was sallow-faced, 8 months heavy, and her beautiful big eyes were the only thing that still looked alive. They needed meat, and there was none in this house. I went to my second uncle's place first. They had slaughtered their New Year pig that day. The smell of stewed pork bones hit me at the gate. I asked politely. His wife looked at me like I was a stray dog and told me to borrow from someone else, my own aunt, and she would not lend a piece of meat to a 3-year-old and a pregnant woman. I swallowed my pride and left. My fault. Every door in this village was closed to me because I had closed them myself with drinking and gambling. On the way back, I passed Aunt May's house. The smell of cooked meat drifted through her gate. I walked in and asked. Aunt May was different. Her husband had butchered pigs for others and brought home a few pigtails. She scooped one into a bowl, still hot, along with a ring of fatty meat at the base. She told me to slice the fat and stir-fry it with pickled vegetables. Then, she looked me in the eye and told me to treat my wife and son well and stop drinking myself stupid. I took the bowl and said, "Aunt May, I've woken up." She sighed behind me as I jogged home, but I did not hear her sigh. I was running, holding that bowl of borrowed meat like it was gold, and all I could think was that my wife and son would eat tonight. Home was not a mansion. It was 2 crumbling adobe rooms and a mud courtyard wall, but my wife was there, and my son was there, and a bowl of meat was in my hands. In the kitchen, I sliced the fatty meat, chopped pickled vegetables into shreds, and stir-fried everything in the only oil we had. Li Juan panicked about the oil. I grinned and told her we would get through today first. The sizzle filled the room, and the sour savory aroma hit every corner. No MSG, no ginger, no garlic sprouts, just salt and ground peppercorn. It was the best thing I had ever cooked. Wen could not hold his chopsticks steady. They wobbled back and forth, but he managed to pick up a mouthful of noodles and shoved it toward my face. "Dad, you eat too!" Tears again. In 30 years, my son had never once fed me. I took his bowl and fed him. 1 bite for him, 1 bite for me, crying the whole time while he told me not to cry. Li Juan sat on the edge of the kang, watching, eating slowly, thinking. She gave the meat from her own mouth to Wen when she thought I was not looking. After dinner, I took my son outside. The snow had stopped. The village was dark and cold, but I had a string of firecrackers bought for 50 cents and a boy who had never played with his father. We set them off one at a time. I held Wen in my arms, his small hand in my big hand, the incense tip trembling toward the fuse. The spark caught. I scooped him up and ran. The bang echoed off the adobe walls. "Giggle, giggle, Papa fun, Papa again." We did it again and again. Every explosion he laughed harder. His face was red from cold and delight. Li Juan watched from the doorway. The whole time, from first fuse to last bang, she watched her husband hold their son and run and laugh. In all their years together, she said later, this kind of happy father-son moment had never happened. I saw the tears rolling down her cheeks. I walked behind her and asked why she was crying. She wiped her face with her palm and said nothing. I knew. It was happiness and grievance tangled so tight she could not separate them. We brought Wen inside to warm his frozen hands by the stove. His cotton jacket was a hand-me-down, mended and thin. His shoes had been patched, layer on layer. The backs of his small hands were cracked and bleeding. I sent Li Juan for ointment. She said it ran out. I asked for $1 to go buy some. She hesitated, terrified I would spend it on liquor, then gave me a single dime instead and told me to buy cream at the village shop. I ran out and back in 5 minutes, panting, sweating in the cold. "Why are you running so fast?" she asked. "I don't want to leave you and son for even a second." I rubbed cream into my boy's cracked hands with water from the stove. Then I told my wife I was going out, tonight, into the mountains. She grabbed my arm. "You promised you wouldn't play cards." "Wife, I'm gonna catch wild rabbits." In my first life, at this same hour, I had been running across a wasteland to beg my second aunt for help because Li Juan had fallen and gone into labor. As I crossed that field, I startled 2 rabbits. I remembered exactly where they were. I remembered the exact time. I found a large net in the back alley cave, along with a heavy sheepskin coat. I took Li Juan's ball of wool yarn for rope. She sat on the kong, watching me like I had lost my mind. But she did not stop me. An hour later, 2 grayish-white rabbits hopped down from the hillside, straight toward the threshing ground where the wheat straw was piled. I had the net propped on 4 hemp stalks, connected by wool yarn. I crouched 100 meters away, gripping the line, not breathing. The first rabbit went under. The second paused. My heart hammered so loud I thought it would scare them off. Then the second hopped forward, both under the net. I yanked the yarn. The stalks fell. The net dropped over them. They kicked and thrashed, but the more they ran, the tighter they tangled. More than 10 yuan in my hand. Vermicelli, candy, peanuts for the new year, but not enough for new clothes. I remembered something else. In my first life, the afternoon after Li Juan died, I went to the mountain gully to find a burial site. Under a cliff edge, gravediggers found over 10 pheasants huddled against the cold. If they were there tomorrow afternoon, they were likely there tonight. I dropped the rabbits at home and told Li Juan I was going into the mountains for pheasants. She wrapped her red scarf around my neck, layer by layer, covering my ears. She said to be careful, come back early. I could have cried again, but I was done crying for the night. The mountain gully was half an hour of walking through heavy snow. I followed the dense claw prints by flashlight until the beam found them. More than 20 pheasants packed together under a cliff overhang, barely moving, frozen nearly stiff. I spread the net on the snow in front of them, tied wool yarn to one edge, and threw weighted soil lumps to the top of the cliff, climbed up, pulled the net taut, one side hanging from the cliff face, the other flat on the ground. Lowered it carefully until it covered the flock. My fingers were numb and splitting, but I warmed them under the sheepskin and kept going. I slid down, reached under the net, and grabbed the first one. It shrieked. The rest exploded upward in a blind panic and tangled themselves in the mesh. 5 or 6 escaped into the dark sky. The rest, more than 10 birds, were mine. 20 pounds of live pheasant, new clothes for my wife and son. Back home, I stewed one bird in a pot of water for Li Juan. She would wake to chicken soup. Then I sat by the Kong, watching the fire, watching my wife breathe, watching my son curl in his quilt. Past 3 in the morning, I did not want to close my eyes. I was afraid that if I slept, I would wake up back in the ICU with the monitors screaming and my son walking away. At dawn, I ate 3 kitchen god cakes with hot water, loaded 15 live pheasants and 2 rabbits into bags, and told Li Juan I was walking to the Honghui mining area, 40 li of snowy road. She said to come back early, the same words she had said last night, but softer now, closer to trust. I walked for 3 hours through frozen white silence, stopping every so often to open the bags so the birds could breathe. When I reached the row of single-story houses, I put the bags down in the courtyard and shouted that I had brought wild chickens and rabbits. A dozen women came out, miners' wives, starved for fresh meat in those remote camps. The birds were alive, wings beating, feet kicking. I priced them at 10 yuan each, 20 for 2 rabbits. They said I was ripping them off. I looked at them and spoke from my chest. If I didn't have my wife about to give birth and my son waiting at home, who would catch these in ice and snow at midnight? I'm begging you, don't haggle. This is sweat and blood money. The first woman put down 20 yuan and took 2 chickens. The second followed. The third. Within minutes, every last bird and both rabbits were gone. 170 yuan. Then, I heard the women talking among themselves about fish. Nobody could get fresh fish because the snow had blocked the roads. The miners needed fish for New Year's. Year after year, there is surplus, they said. The word for surplus sounds like fish. Without fish, the holiday was incomplete. A light went on in my head. I told them I would bring fish by afternoon. I jogged 50 li to the county agricultural market, bought 46 live carp at 1 yuan 20 per pound, loaded them onto a small pull cart I rented from a woman for 10 yuan, and started the haul back. Halfway there, a coal truck stopped and the driver gave me a ride. I gave him a fish wrapped in newspaper. He wished me prosperity from selling fish. I wished him prosperity from hauling coal. By evening, I was standing in the mining area courtyard again, shouting for everyone to come grab fish. They swarmed. 5 yuan for 2 small ones, 8 for a medium, 10 for a large. The bags emptied so fast, I had to wrestle 2 fish back for my own family. I sat on the snowy road, smoothed out every crumpled bill, and counted 22 tens, 25 twos, 8 ones, 278 yuan. In my first life, millions passed through my accounts without feeling. This 278 yuan filled me so full, I thought my ribs would crack. I ran nearly the whole way home. At the gate, my legs gave out, and I caught myself on the mud courtyard wall, steadied my breathing, walked in. Dad is back! Wen launched himself at me. I lifted him high and laughed until my throat hurt. Li Juan came out of the kitchen with wide eyes. All day she had been restless. She had calculated the pheasants and rabbits at 70 or 80 yuan and spent the day in a haze, waiting for me to come home either with money or with the defeated look of a man who had gambled it away. She told me later that she had prepared herself. Even 10 yuan would mean he was changing, even 8. I pulled the bills from inside my coat and put them in her hands. Count it. She almost collapsed. I grabbed her before she sat on the ground. Be careful. You're already scared by less than 300 yuan? Her hands trembled. She closed her eyes and whispered, He Ning, tell me I'm not dreaming. You're not dreaming. This money is clean. I earned it step by step, walking over 150 li. She opened her eyes, and the tears came. She dropped to her knees, pulled Wen against her chest, and sobbed, not quietly, not delicately. The raw, cracking sound of a woman who had stopped believing things could get better and just found out she was wrong. I panicked. Wife, I earned money. Why are you still crying? I'm happy, she said, and kept sobbing. Wen saw his mother crying, and his lip quivered, and he started bawling too. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I picked up my son, carried him into the courtyard, and lit a firecracker. The fuse hissed. I grabbed him tight and ran. The bang echoed against the walls. He laughed. That sound, that giggling, gasping 3-year-old laugh, it was worth more than every yuan in my pocket. Li Juan stood in the courtyard with the money pressed against her chest. She counted it once, twice, 278 yuan. She watched us, father and son, explosions and laughter, and for the first time in years, a real smile broke across her face. When we came inside, I told her the plan. The fish market was open. The miners needed more. If she gave me the money back as working capital, I could double it tomorrow, using Aunt May's mule cart instead of my legs. She did not want to let go of those bills. Every cell in her body screamed that if that money left her hands, it would vanish into a card game. He Ning, I'm not greedy, she said. This is enough. Stay home. Keep me and our son company. I held her shoulders and looked her in the eyes. In all our years, she said later, she had never seen me look like that, like a man on fire. Trust me, I said. When I come back tomorrow night, I'll double this money for you. She looked at the bills, looked at me. Slowly, finger by finger, she let go. We walked to Aunt May's house that evening, Wen in my arms, 2 fish as a gift. Aunt May scolded me for dragging a pregnant woman through the snow, then helped Li Juan inside. When she heard what I had done, she looked at me like I was a stranger. She lent me the mule cart, 2 days. On the walk home, the snow had stopped and the stars were out. Li Juan leaned slightly toward me, not touching, not yet, but closer than she had been in years. 5 days left, 1,000 yuan debt still hanging, a baby still growing inside my wife. But 278 yuan sat in Li Juan's pocket, and my son had laughed in my arms twice in 2 nights. And for the first time since I woke on that Kong, I believed I could do this. Not because I was brave, not because I was smart, because I had already seen what happened when I did nothing, and I would crawl through broken glass before I let it happen again. I woke before dawn on the 25th of the 12th lunar month, grinning like an idiot in the dark. Li Juan had brewed tea and left it by the stove. When I said I was heading out, she turned and rummaged through her clothes without a word. She pulled out a bundle of crumpled bills, 10s, 2s, 1s, over 100 yuan, everything she had hidden in the lining of her jacket. Come back soon, she said. That was all. In 30 years of marriage, the first time around, she never once handed me money willingly. I had stolen it, begged for it, torn the house apart looking for it. Now she was pressing it into my hands with her eyes closed, choosing to believe. Aunt May's mule cart was waiting outside her gate. I snapped the reins. The mule broke into a trot on the frozen road. No young man in his right mind would drive a mule cart through heavy snow to the county seat before sunrise. But I wasn't in my right mind. I was in my second life. The county farmer's market opened at first light. 5 fish vendors, 300 gin of carp, 350 yuan spent. I ate 2 bowls of beef noodles at 8 mao each, warming my stomach until my fingers stopped shaking. Then drove the mule straight to the Honghui mining area. 3 hours on the main road. When I pulled into the residential compound, the miners' wives came running before I could unhitch. Young man, you came back. I'm not coming tomorrow, I said, spending the holiday with my wife and kids. The truth was, I knew coal trucks would haul in their own fish shipments by afternoon. My window was these 2 days of downtime before the supply chain caught up. 30 years of watching this economy taught me that every gap closes. You either fill it first or watch someone else collect. The fish sold fast. 370 yuan doubled from 1 load of carp. With yesterday's earnings and today's profit, I was sitting on over 700 yuan. 700 yuan. My family had been surviving on pickled vegetables and millet for a year, and now I had 700 yuan in the lining of my coat. I still had time. The 25th was market day in Gaoya town. The New Year's fair would be packed to the walls. I tied the mule to a telephone pole outside the market and walked in. The noise hit me like a wave. I made a list in my head, not what I wanted, what my family needed. 50 pounds of rice. My wife and son had not eaten 3 meals of plain white rice all year. A basket of 100 eggs, bowls, chopsticks, serving dishes, a kettle, a square dining table and 6 wooden stools. New curtains, new sheets, 2 cotton quilts, door gods, spring festival couplets, 2 big red lanterns, peanuts, jujubes, candy in every color, vermicelli, garlic sprouts, spices for boiling meat, 2 sets of new clothes for Wen, head to toe, 2 outfits for Li Juan, a jar of brown sugar. I loaded the cart trip after trip until there was no room left. Over 200 yuan spent. Li Juan would see a cart full of things and no cash, and she would cry. I knew her, but I had 500 yuan still hidden in the inner pocket of my padded coat. That was the trick, not honesty, timing. 30 years of knowing this woman taught me her psychology. She needed to feel the money in her hands. She needed to count it. She needed to know it was safe. If I showed her 700 yuan and then spent 200, she would calculate loss. but if I showed her the goods first, let her panic, then revealed the 500 yuan, her fear would flip to joy. She would trust me more, not less, because the surprise proved the money was real and still growing. I was heading back to the cart with peanuts in one hand and candy in the other when I saw two familiar figures near my mule. Yang Biao, 4 men behind him. My hand found the kitchen knife I had bought 10 minutes earlier. I slipped it into my coat pocket and walked straight toward the cart. Yang Biao stepped into my path. He told me I had money for all this, but nothing to pay him back. He ordered his men to unload the cart. I pulled the knife. Who dares? One of them did. Wang Erhunze, the man with parted hair, stuck his neck out and stepped forward. I raised the cleaver and brought it down hard. The blade caught him from shoulder to back. In winter, through thick padded coats, the cut wasn't deep, but blood soaked through the cloth, and he screamed and stumbled backward. Yang Biao's mouth hung open. The old He Ning would have dropped to his knees and begged. I pocketed the knife before the crowd grew too large and switched to a weapon that worked better in daylight: my voice. I roared so the entire market could hear. I told them how Yang Biao threatened my pregnant wife, stole my heating coal, lured me into a rigged game, made me sign an IOU for 1,000 yuan I never actually received, then sent his thugs to collect on a debt that was never real. The crowd turned. A pregnant wife, a stolen roof, a rigged bet. Every detail was true, and every detail landed like a punch. Then I leaned close enough that only Yang Biao could hear. You went to the Huang family's young wife 3 days ago, and the Zhang family's wife. After the 3rd day of the new year, you'll be going to prison. His face went white. He couldn't figure out how I knew, so I gave him an answer he could believe. His man Wang Erhunzi had a cousin named Zhang Aibo in my village. Erhunzi told Zhang Aibo. Zhang Aibo told me. A clean chain, completely plausible. Wang Erhunzi started shaking. Yang Biao stared at his own man like he wanted to kill him. I offered a trade, return my IOU. I keep my mouth shut. Yang Biao reached into his pocket and handed me the paper. I tore it up and fed the pieces to the wind. Do I still owe you money? We don't owe each other anymore. In my first life, on this exact day, I had carried a kitchen knife to Yang Biao's card shop in a drunken rage, slashed him, gotten arrested, and spent a month in prison while my wife bled to death at home. This time, I walked away with the debt erased and my cart intact. The mule cart passed my second uncle's gate on the way in. Wang Qin came out and saw the loaded cart. Her eyes went wide. Then, she realized it was me driving. I drove straight to Aunt May's house and started unloading. Everything split in two. 25 pounds of rice for her family, 25 for mine. Vermicelli, peanuts, candy, red lanterns. One of everything for both families. Wang Qin appeared and accused Aunt May of lending me money, said I could never earn this much. Neither of us answered her. At my own gate, I saw Li Juan and Wen walking toward me. He launched himself into my arms. Daddy, I want candy. I kissed his round cheeks 3 times. Li Juan came behind him, one hand on her belly, the other reaching for the cart. She saw the mountain of goods. Her face went gray. Inside the house, she lost it. She cried. She begged. She demanded I return everything. The rice, the new clothes, the table and chairs. She had spent all night dreaming about a thick stack of cash growing thicker, and instead, I came home with a cart full of objects she hadn't asked for. Ningzi, you promised you would double the money. Where is it? You spent everything. Give me back my 100 yuan. She was standing in the kitchen, tears running down her cheeks, holding a chive by the root and gesturing with it like a weapon. In that moment, she looked like the most beautiful, most furious woman in the world. Wen ran around the yard, shaking a rattle drum I had bought him. Dong, 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 dong. He didn't care about money. He had candy in his cheeks and a toy in his fist, and his father was home. Li Juan wouldn't eat, wouldn't look at the new cotton coat, wouldn't stop crying. So I reached into the inner lining of my coat. I pulled out the bills. Thick, heavy, 500 yuan, not a penny less. Juan, who said I spent everything? She stopped mid-sob. Her mouth opened. Her eyes locked on the cash. You didn't spend it all? 370 doubled is 700 and change. Subtract 200 for New Year's goods. What's left? She took the money from my hand. Counted it again, 500 yuan. Her face cycled through every emotion a face can make in 10 seconds. Shock, disbelief, slow dawning joy, then something crumbling behind her eyes that might have been the last wall she had built against hoping. I scooped rice into the new aluminum pot, washed chives, sliced pickled cabbage, cracked 3 eggs, made 2 dishes in 15 minutes, set them on the new square table with 3 bowls of white rice. She stared at the rice like it was made of jade. When did you learn to cook? She asked. 4 years of marriage in this timeline, and I had never once cooked. She didn't know that in another life, after she died, I had cooked for myself for 30 years. I had stir-fried more pickled cabbage than any man alive. Eat, I said. Our daughter is hungry. She ate, slowly at first, then faster. Then, she forgot to use her chopsticks and started scooping rice into her mouth with the bowl tilted. After dinner, we set off firecrackers in the courtyard again, 10 more. Wen wanted his mother to try. Li Juan held the incense with trembling fingers, lit the fuse, threw the firecracker, then covered her ears after the bang. That made me laugh so hard my stomach hurt. We walked to the village store for more firecrackers. That walk told me how far I still had to climb. Yang Biao walked in carrying a jar for bulk liquor. He waved a 100 yuan bill in my face and asked if I had ever even seen one. He was right. I had been selling fish for ones and twos. I had never handled a single 100 yuan note. I whispered to Li Juan. She pulled together exactly 100 yuan in small bills. I exchanged for Yang Biao's 100. His face went from smug to confused to silent. Inside, the village women mocked Li Juan's new clothes, insisting my sister must have bought them. Aunt May walked in and shut them down. She confirmed I had earned the money, bought the goods, and brought a full cartload of supplies for both families. Yang Biao stood there with his wine jar, watching me hold my son in new clothes, watching my wife lean against me in her red cotton coat. Something changed behind his eyes, not respect, envy. Before I left, I spoke softly enough that only he could hear. I told him Yang Biao had gone to the Huang family's wife 3 days ago. His cousin Wang Erhunzi let it slip. Same chain I had used on Yang Biao earlier. Clean, plausible, terrifying. Yang Biao will come looking for you, I said. Leave the village for a few days. In my first life, this man had been my drinking partner, the anchor dragging me into every vice. In this life, he was the first person I needed to cut loose. He stood frozen in the doorway, pale as paper. I walked home with my wife and son. The rattle drum beat all the way back. Dong dong dang. That was the 25th. The days after that were preparation. I swept the courtyard, hung the red lanterns, pasted door gods and spring couplets. I would not let Li Juan leave the house. She was too close. Every time she stood up too fast or winced or put her hand on her belly, my heart stopped. Ningzi, you said it's a girl named Yue? After the Lantern Festival, right? You said after the Lantern Festival. She laughed. That's an estimate. Could be a few days early. Could be late. Juan, I'm taking you to the hospital tomorrow. What hospital? I gave birth to Wen right here on this kang. Why would I go to the hospital? She did not understand. She could not understand. In her mind, childbirth was something that happened at home with a midwife and hot water. She had no concept of what could go wrong because the first time, with Wen, nothing did. But I knew what could go wrong. I had lived through it. Every minute that passed without labor was a gift. Every normal evening, every meal she finished, every morning she woke up and stretched and complained about her back. I hoarded those moments like coins. It happened on the evening of the 26th. Li Juan was squatting in the storage room, organizing New Year's goods with a flashlight. She was talking to the baby, quietly, softly, the way she talked when she thought no one was listening. Yue, look, these are New Year's goods your daddy earned to buy for us? Yue, you believe he's a good father, right? Then her stomach contracted. A dull, sudden pain. She lost her balance and fell backward onto the ground. I heard the shout from the courtyard. One syllable, sharp. The sound cut through me like a blade. I ran. She was sitting on the floor of the storage room, flashlight rolling beside her, hands on her belly. She looked up at me with a face that was half pain, half confusion. Ningzi, could I be going into labor? Everything stopped. I have been asked many times in my life what fear feels like. People think it is a racing heart or shaking hands. It is not. Real fear is the opposite. Real fear is stillness. Every organ goes quiet. Your brain empties. Your body becomes a hollow shell standing in a room, and the only thing left inside it is a memory you have spent 30 years trying to bury. Blood, snow, silence. My wife's screams stopping. My daughter's cry that never came. Don't scare me, I heard myself say. You said after the Lantern Festival. Ningxi, it's not like I haven't had children before. Go call Aunt May and Grandma Zhang. Li Juan stood up and cried out again. Another contraction. My legs were shaking so badly I could barely walk, but she was calm. She told me to light the stove in the main room, move Wen next door, then run for the midwife. I ran. Aunt May's door. I banged on it with both fists. Aunt May, save them! She grabbed hemp paper and cotton and sprinted toward my house before I finished the sentence. I turned and ran the other way to the Zhang family compound. Grandma Zhang asked if the baby was already coming. I did not have time to explain. I crouched down, lifted the frail old woman onto my back, and ran all the way home. When I got back, Aunt May had already moved Wen to the main room. He was fast asleep, the rattle drum still clenched in his small hand. He did not stir. Li Juan was on the Kong, crying out in waves, each contraction louder than the last. I grabbed Aunt May's arm. My knees buckled. I almost went down. Aunt May, she was born premature. She's going to die. Please save her. Aunt May looked at me like I had lost my mind. Ningzi, Juan is giving birth normally. It's not premature. What is wrong with you? She pushed me toward the door. I threw myself back onto the Kong and grabbed Li Juan. Wife, I'm sober now. I'm really sober. I love you. I love our son and daughter. You have to believe me. Aunt May physically dragged me off the bed. Your wife is in labor and you're holding her and screaming, "Get out! Get out!" Li Juan raised her head. She saw my face and something in her expression shifted. She was the one in agony, but she was worried about me. Ningzi, listen to Aunt May. Go out. Don't be afraid. I couldn't stop talking. I told her I was scared. I told her I was sorry. I told her it was my fault for not taking her to the hospital. I told her I was not human. The words poured out of me like water from a cracked vessel. 30 years of grief compressed into a doorway between a kitchen and the only woman I had ever loved. Aunt May shoved me through the door and slammed it shut. I crouched against the wall outside. The cold hit me like a hammer. My knees drew up to my chest. My hands covered my ears, then dropped because I needed to hear. Inside, Grandma Zhang was murmuring prayers. Aunt May was coaching Li Juan, telling her to push, telling her to think about the new cotton coat, the New Year's goods stacked in the storage room. Li Juan screamed again, and again, and again. In my first life, on the night of the 23rd, these screams had ended in silence. Blood soaked the Kang. The baby never cried. I was playing cards at Zhang Aibo's house while my wife bled to death alone. Now I was here, right here, and the screams sounded the same. I wept against the kitchen door. No sound came out, just gasping and tears and my mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. Wife, daughter, please don't die. I'll give my life for yours. From inside, Aunt May shouted, "Stop screaming at the door and go to sleep." From inside, Li Juan's voice, broken with pain. "Aunt, don't scold him. He's scared." She was in the middle of labor, her body splitting apart, and she was protecting me from a scolding. Aunt May's voice changed, urgent. "The head is out. Push, push." Li Juan screamed. One final, searing, endless scream. Then a cry, not hers, smaller, louder, furious. A baby screaming at the world. My vision blurred. My body went limp. The last thing I remember before the darkness took me was the sound of that cry filling the house, filling the courtyard, filling every empty space inside my chest where 30 years of silence had lived. I fainted. When I came to, Aunt May was stepping over me in the doorway, carrying a basin of bloody water. She nearly tripped. "Ningzi, what are you doing collapsed on the doorstep?" I grabbed her arm with both hands. My fingers dug in so hard she winced. "Auntie, I want my wife and daughter. Your wife and daughter are perfectly fine. What is wrong with you?" I dragged myself upright and squeezed through the kitchen door. The room was warm. Grandma Zhang's hands were covered in blood. I saw it, and my legs gave out again. Aunt May pulled me back up. She told me I was insane. I was shaking so violently my teeth were chattering, not from cold, from the aftershock of something I cannot name. In the first timeline, there was only silence. A dead baby pulled from a dying woman. Now there was screaming, ugly, furious, alive. "My daughter is okay? She's fine. She's born. Stop asking." Li Juan turned her head and gave me the weakest, most beautiful smile I have ever seen. "Ningzi, listen to your aunt. Go out. See the baby tomorrow." "I'm not going out." I dropped to my knees. I kowtowed, forehead to the ground, 3 times. Once to Li Juan, once to Aunt May, once to Grandma Zhang. Aunt May went quiet. She looked at me on the ground, forehead dusty, tears cutting lines through the dirt on my face. "Warm your hands first," she said. "You're freezing. Don't touch the baby until you're warm." I pressed my palms against the stove until the skin burned. Then I approached the Kang slowly, like I was walking towards something sacred. Li Juan reached for my hand. Her grip was weak, but her fingers were warm. "Ningzi, you have a daughter now." "Yes," I whispered. "I have a daughter." Grandma Zhang wrapped the baby like a rice dumpling and handed her to Aunt May. Aunt May glanced at the bundle, laughed, and held her out to me. "Here, go ahead and admire your ugly son." I took her with both hands. She was tiny, wrinkled, dark. Her face was scrunched in permanent outrage, fists clenched, mouth open. She looked like an angry walnut. She was the most extraordinary thing I had ever held. "Aunt May, what happened? Why isn't she chubby and fair?" "Newborns aren't chubby and fair. She needs breast milk first." I pulled Yue against my chest and buried my face in her. The smell of her, new skin and iron, and something sweet underneath. I pressed my lips to her wrinkled forehead. "Daddy's gone mad," I muttered. Yue, my daughter. In my first life, this girl never drew a single breath. They pulled her out already gone. I buried her in a box so small, I carried it with one hand. For 30 years, I wondered what she would have looked like, sounded like, felt like. Now she was screaming in my arms, loud and ugly and alive. Li Juan's voice came softly from the Kong. Ningzi, make me a big bowl of brown sugar water. I laid Yue gently beside her mother and ran to the other room. Pried open the jar with a knife, scooped a lump of dark sugar into a bowl, poured boiling water, stirred until it dissolved, brought it back and held it to her lips. Drink slow, it's hot. Aunt May stayed through the night. I made millet porridge at midnight, brown sugar water twice. I fed the stove coal every hour, checked on Wen, tiptoed back to watch Yue nurse with her tiny mouth working against Li Juan's chest. By dawn, Grandma Zhang inspected Li Juan one more time, pronounced her healthy, and left. Wen woke screaming for his mother. I dressed him, rubbed cream on his cracked hands, and carried him into the kitchen. Li Juan opened her arms. He threw himself into them. Mommy! Then, after 30 seconds of desperate clinging, he pulled back and looked at the tiny bundle beside her. Mommy, hug little sister. He climbed down off the kang, grabbed his rattle drum, and started shaking it. Dong dong dang. I caught his hand and pressed the drum quiet. Shh, your sister just got here. Loud sounds scare her. He looked at me with enormous eyes. Then he tiptoed, a 3-year-old attempting stealth, stomping with every step, and peered at Yue's face. She's ugly, he announced. Li Juan laughed so hard she winced from the stitches. Aunt May came back with clean diapers and stayed to help. She told me she was postponing her family's pig slaughter to look after Li Juan first. I protested. She waved me off. Juan comes first. The pig isn't going anywhere. I stood in the doorway, watching Aunt May change Yue's cloth, watching Li Juan drink millet porridge spoonful by spoonful, watching Wen tiptoe around the room with his muffled rattle drum. Outside, the red lanterns I had hung the day before swayed in the morning wind. The courtyard was clean. The storage room was full. 500 yuan sat in my wife's pocket. My daughter was breathing. 3 days ago, I had woken up in this body with nothing. An empty kitchen, a terrified wife, a son who flinched when I raised my voice, and 1,000 yuan debt to a man who would have broken my legs. Now the debt was ash in the wind. The house was stocked for the holiday. My wife had survived labor, and the daughter who died in my first life was wrapped in cotton, sleeping against her mother's chest, her tiny lungs pulling air in and pushing it out, over and over. The most ordinary miracle in the world. I leaned against the doorframe. I closed my eyes. I breathed. It worked. I changed the timeline. The death that haunted me for 30 years did not happen. My wife was alive. My daughter was alive. My son was wearing new shoes and shaking a rattle drum. But I was not foolish enough to think the hard part was over. The money would run out. Zhang Aibo would come back. My second uncle's family would make trouble at New Year's. The village still saw me as a drunk. Proving them wrong would take months. But that was tomorrow's fight. Tonight, my wife had milk for our daughter. My son had candy in his pocket. The stove was warm, and the lanterns were red, and the courtyard smelled like gunpowder and brown sugar. I had made so many promises since I woke up in this life. To Li Juan, to Wen, to the daughter I hadn't met yet. This was the first promise I kept. Yue was alive. My sister arrived on the 26th, the same morning Yue was born. I did not know she was coming. He Yan had driven a donkey cart 30 li through heavy snow from Shaoshui village, a thick stick on the seat beside her, fully intending to break my legs. She had fought with her husband that morning over bringing Li Juan home to recover. On the road, she had passed Wang Qin's courtyard and gotten an earful about me threatening elders with a kitchen knife. She expected the usual scene, Wen screaming in the yard, me passed out drunk, Li Juan sobbing. 4 years straight, that was every visit. Instead, she heard a rattle drum, dong dong dong, and Wen's voice, bright and clear. Dad, eat plain rice and scrambled eggs? She froze at the gate. I came running out with Wen in my arms. She shoved my hug away like I was diseased. Get out of here. Don't make me hate you. But her eyes were on Wen. New clothes, round grinning face, candy stains on his collar. He shouted, doo-doo, and she scooped him up and buried her nose in his neck. I told her Li Juan had given birth, both mother and daughter safe. He Yan forgot to scold me and ran inside. The kitchen stopped her cold. Li Juan nursing Yue on the Kong with a peaceful smile. New pots and bowls stacked on the ground beside bags of peanuts, candy, door gods, lanterns. Red cloth hung on the doorframe. Aunt May warming rice on the stove. What a show-off, He Yan said. 3 days of enthusiasm. Li Juan tried to explain. Aunt May tried. He Yan would not hear it. She had watched me destroy everything I touched for years. 2 days of buying groceries meant nothing. When I asked Li Juan for 10 yuan to buy a chicken in the village, He Yan's eyes narrowed. If you take 10 yuan and don't come back, she said. I'll break your legs. I came back with a chicken. She watched me kill the chicken, scald the feathers, set the pot for Li Juan's soup. She watched me ask Li Juan for 400 yuan as capital for an overnight orange run to the mining area. She watched Li Juan hand it over without hesitation. Juan, he's only enthusiastic for 3 or 5 days. Don't give him any more money to mess around with. But Li Juan just smiled. She trusted me now, not because of promises, because of the brown sugar water at midnight, the millet porridge at dawn, the kowtow on the kitchen floor. She did not need my sister's permission to believe. At dusk, I harnessed He Yan's donkey to the cart, put on my tattered sheepskin coat, and pulled out into the freezing dark. Humph, she said to my back. 3 or 5 days. The road took all night. At 4 in the morning, I gave Director Liu at the county farmer's market 2 boxes of Hongtashan cigarettes and 50 yuan in fees. He wrote me a note for 500 jin of oranges. In my first life, I had found this man a year later. 30 years of business sense does not disappear just because you wake up in a 22-year-old body. 1 more box of cigarettes bought me 5 extra baskets from the loading supervisor. 30 baskets total. 300 yuan paid. Every coin I had was gone. The donkey pulled the load through darkness and snow. On a steep hill, the animal slipped and went down on its knees. I unloaded the baskets, carried them up the slope, 10 at a time, reloaded at the top. My legs were shaking so badly I could barely stand, but I was not cold anymore. Dawn broke over the mining area. First vendor there. No trucks had made it through the snow. 29 baskets, sold in under an hour at 25 yuan each. I kept the last one for my family. Stopped at a courtyard for 5 bags, 700 yuan. I had left with 400. He Yan was pacing the courtyard when the donkey cart pulled in. I slapped 700 yuan on the table. Her hands trembled as she counted. Ningzi, you earned 300 yuan on a single trip? I asked for scrambled eggs. She told me to eat the pickled cabbage and get out. I asked for meat. She said there was none. I threatened to go eat pork at Aunt May's house. Return, she shouted. Then, quieter. Where's Juan's money? Fry me an egg and I'll show you. No eggs. But I watched my sister count 700 yuan 3 times. I watched her face fight between suspicion and something she was not ready to call hope. I split the profit. 100 to He Yan, 100 to Aunt May as payment for a 30 jin pork leg. Not charity, a purchase. I walked to Aunt May's house, gave her husband He Bao Yin a box of Hongtashan cigarettes and a bag of oranges, apologized for all the trouble, and carried the pork leg home on my shoulder. That night, He Yan cooked chicken soup noodles for Li Juan, steamed 2 pots of flour buns, and separated the pork leg for braised meat. She worked like a woman trying to pack a month of caring into one evening. Before bed, she called me over. Ningzi, promise me, New Year's Eve, the first month, no drinking, no gambling, just like tonight. I raised my hand. Sister, I, He Ning, your own brother, swear and promise to take good care of my wife and children, take good care of Grandpa, not drink, not gamble, so that you can rest assured, and so that Aunt May can rest assured. She stared at my face. She did not believe me, but she wanted to. On the morning of the 28th, she loaded her donkey cart with fish, oranges, and steamed buns. At the gate, she turned around one last time. Ningzi, I see your good intentions. I've noticed them all, but please keep going, okay? I hugged her. I held on too long, and she shoved me off, but I had seen her eyes, wet, not from the wind. Sister, after this new year, I'll make a lot of money and build you and brother-in-law the most beautiful new house. The donkey cart clattered away down the village road and vanished into the gray morning. 3 days of enthusiasm. That was what she called it. She was not wrong to think that. Every year of evidence supported her. But there was something I could not wait for time to fix. On the 26th, while He Yan was still with us, my grandfather had appeared at my gate. He Wanli, 83 years old. He lived in a low mud house on the west side of my second uncle's compound. Everyone in the village knew He Guomen and Wang Qin had a reputation for caring for the elderly, the kind of reputation built at village meetings while feeding the old man slop in a freezing room. When Grandpa shuffled into my courtyard, his lips were trembling, his hands were black, his face was black, his beard was black. It looked like he had not washed since the start of winter. He was wearing a tattered cotton coat, so thin I could see his ribs through it. Ningzi, Grandpa is cold. He had walked out of that dark little house because the stove was dead and no one had come to check on him. Not that morning, not the night before. He came to me because I was the only door left. I sat him by the stove and fed him chicken soup with rice, spoonful by spoonful, because his hands shook too badly to hold the spoon. Ningzi, I'm blocking your way. You won't survive, he mumbled between bites. I told him he was staying with me from now on. He Yan grabbed my arm. Are you out of your mind? Do you think you can just carry Grandpa over? Do you think second uncle and second aunt will let you? She was right about the politics. He Guomen was Grandpa's son, Taking the old man meant publicly declaring his own child had abandoned him. The village would talk. Wang Qin would explode. But I had been to that room. Cold stove, blackened quilts, trash on the floor. The Kang was cold as cement. In my first life, my grandfather died on the 8th day of the first lunar month. Everyone said he went peacefully. I was in a detention center and never questioned it. Now I questioned everything. He Yan left on the 28th morning. That afternoon, I took Wen to my second uncle's house. Son, I'm having a fight with your second uncle and aunt. Don't be afraid. Cheer for your dad, okay? Keep it up. Keep it up. Wang Qin came out with eyes like a winter snake. Wen buried his face in my chest. I asked to see my second uncle. He Guomen stumbled out half asleep and grumbled at me for making noise in his yard. I asked one question. Second uncle, where is my grandfather? He said the old man was in his room. He had no idea his father had been gone since the previous afternoon. Neither of them had lifted that curtain in over a day. Not to bring food, not to check the stove, not to see if an 83-year-old man was still breathing. I walked home without another word. I needed them to not know where Grandpa was until the right moment. That moment came later on the 28th, when my second uncle, my second aunt, and the village chief stood in my courtyard. They had come to demand money. He Guomen had fed the village chief bone broth and meat, then walked him over to mediate. The pitch. He Ning earned some money, so he should pay his grandfather's living expenses, 100 yuan a year. I led them to my second uncle's house. I stood in front of the little room on the west side and asked the village chief to go inside and call my grandfather out. He Fuyin lifted the curtain. Empty. The Kong was cold. The stove was dead. The room smelled like neglect. Guomen, wait, isn't our uncle home? He Guomen bent over and craned his neck inside. Dad? Huh? Where's my dad? He turned to Wang Qin. She said she had no idea. He said she was supposed to bring food. She said that was not her job. They argued right there in front of the village chief, pointing at each other while their father was missing, and neither had noticed for 2 days. The village chief's face turned bruised and purple. I let the silence hang. Then I said 3 things. Uncle Village Chief, my grandfather has been at my house since yesterday. My second uncle and aunt didn't even know. If he had frozen to death, they still wouldn't know. My second uncle is asking me for living expenses. How can he have the nerve? You ate their meat for lunch, Uncle Village Chief. My grandfather didn't get a single bite. How can you have the nerve? 3 sentences. Each one landed like a stone dropped into still water. I walked them to my house. There sat He Wanli on the Kong, dressed head to toe in brand new gray-black silk cotton clothes that I had bought him for 50 yuan in town. On the table beside him, white rice, braised pork, vermicelli stew. Wen was curled in the old man's lap, tugging his beard. The village chief asked Wen, when did your great-grandfather come to your house? Yesterday. Grandpa played with me. Where did your great-grandfather get his new clothes? Dad bought them. The village chief dragged He Guomen outside and told him he should be ashamed. The old man stays at He Ning's house through the new year. No trouble. He Guomen tried once more. I'll take your grandfather back. I called him by his full name. He Guomen, my grandfather is by my side, dressed in new clothes, eating well. You saw it. The village chief saw it. Now get out of my yard. He left. From across the wall, I heard Wang Qin screaming at him, then a crash, then more screaming. I did not feel satisfaction. I felt tired. That afternoon, the village chief's wife came with Aunt Lu. They brought 5 fried dough cakes and a pound of white sugar. The village chief had told them what he saw, and they came to see for themselves. They looked at the swept courtyard, the coal stacked under the shed, Wen in new shoes. They sat with Li Juan in the warm kitchen and asked me about the money. A few trips to the county and the mining area, I said. Earned a little for the new year. They looked at each other. The unspoken verdict passed between them. He Ning, the village drunk, might actually be changing. After they left, Li Juan smiled at me from the Kong. Ningxi, you've been doing so well these past few days. I knew someone would come and give me some milk. Milk. That was what the village called it when women brought gifts to a new mother. For 3 days, no one had come. Li Juan had told herself it was fine, but it was not fine. A wife and children need more than food and warmth. They need the village to walk through the door. Juan, just you wait. All the younger relatives will come to wish us a happy new year. They'll all come to see you. Her eyes brightened. Really? They'll come to our house? They will come, I said. Grandpa is at our house. She did not understand what I meant, not yet, but I did. In a village like ours, the patriarch draws the family. Where the elder sits, the family gathers. I had not just rescued my grandfather, I had pulled the center of gravity into my own home. That evening, I held Yue and watched her scrunched little face. 3 days old, and she still had not opened her eyes. I pressed my cheek against her tiny head. Yue, open your eyes and look at Daddy. Nothing. She yawned and went back to sleep. It's Dad's fault, I whispered. Didn't take good care of Mom's meals this year, but I will, I promise. Li Juan walked across the room and sat beside me. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Outside, the courtyard was quiet. The red lanterns swayed in the evening wind. Coal glowed in the stove. An 83-year-old man snored gently in the next room, warm and fed, and wearing clothes that still had the shop crease in them. My son was asleep with a rattle drum under his arm. My daughter was breathing against my chest. 3 days of enthusiasm, my sister called it. Fine, let it be 3. Then let 3 become 5. 5 become 10. 10 become a month. Let the months stack until even He Ning runs out of doubt. I had not yet proven anything to anyone, not to my sister, not to the village, not to the son who would one day stand at my deathbed and decide whether I was worth calling Dad. But my grandfather was safe, my wife was recovering, my daughter was alive, and tomorrow there would be another chance to show them that this time the change was not temporary. That was enough for tonight. On the 28th of the 12th lunar month, while I was squatting in the courtyard, scrubbing pig intestines with cornmeal, Wang Qin came walking down the lane with He Jun at her side. I had been expecting them. His black Santana had pulled into the village that afternoon, and Wang Qin was the kind of woman who needed an audience for every grudge. She had sent her son to collect. He Jun had a business in the provincial capital, a wife, a daughter, drove home once a year for Spring Festival, and left believing his mother was the wronged party in every dispute she had ever started. I tucked the kitchen knife under my cotton coat and walked out past the gate, 10 meters into the lane. Li Juan called from the kitchen. Ningzi, don't act recklessly. Speak properly. Wife, take care of Wen and Yue. Don't worry about what happens outside. I stood there and waited for them. The memory that filled my head was not from this life. It was from 10 years earlier, on this exact date, the 28th of the 12th lunar month, a fight over land division and family property. Wang Qin had grabbed my mother's hair with both hands and dragged her 10 meters across the courtyard, ripping out a fistful at the root. My mother's scalp bled. She got sick that winter and never fully recovered. 2 years later, she was dead. 18-year-old He Jun had stood and watched his mother do it. I had sworn back then that I would settle that debt. In my first life, I never did. I left the village after Li Juan died, drank my way through 20 years, and the debt rotted inside me. But I was not that man anymore, and the date had come around again. He Jun stopped a few paces away. He was furious, chest puffed, demanding to know why I had assaulted his mother. Wang Qin was behind him, screeching for him to beat me, cursing He Ning up and down. I let them talk. I was watching Wang Qin's hands. He Jun, I said, I don't want to talk about what your mother did to my mother. I only want to do one thing, exactly what she did. The same hand, the same hair. He Jun demanded an apology. Wang Qin shrieked louder. Eventually, He Jun lunged. While he grappled with my arms and kicked at my ribs, Wang Qin threw herself at me from the side. That was what I was waiting for. I freed one hand, grabbed a fistful of Wang Qin's hair, and pulled. 10 years of strength went into that pull. She screamed. He Jun froze. A clump of hair came away in my fist, and beneath it, her scalp showed white. Then, I threw the kitchen knife at He Jun's feet. Brother Jun, you saw the same scene 10 years ago. Your mother pulled my mother's hair and ripped a handful out. I just did the same thing. Fair. Finished. I held out the hand that had pulled her hair. Now pick up that knife and cut my hand off. If I pull back, I'm no member of the He family. He Jun stared at the knife. Wang Qin, shaking with pain, picked it up herself and raised it over my wrist. Her son screamed, Mom, and she stopped. I did not move my hand. Chop, I said. If I flinch, I'm not my mother's son. Wang Qin's face was twisted with fury, but she could not do it. She shoved the knife at He Jun. He could not do it either. He Ning, you're ruthless, he said. Then he grabbed his mother and left. I stood in the lane and watched them go. The clump of hair was still in my fist. I let it fall to the ground. Inside, I found Li Juan in the kitchen, clutching Yue against her chest, eyes wide. Ningzi, what happened? It's done. An old debt. Settled. She did not understand, but she could see I was calm. I went to grandfather's room, washed his feet, tucked the quilt around him. Grandpa, this is your home. We're not going anywhere. The next morning, I took Wen to the village mill to press noodles for the new year. On the way back, I made a mistake. Wen had left his rattle drum at Wang Yuanden's shop, and a boy from the Li family, Granny Li's grandson, Dong Dong, had picked it up and refused to return it. I offered a balloon as a trade. The boy snatched the balloon and kept the drum. When I took the drum back, he ran home crying. I should have known what would follow. Granny Li was the village's professional bully. family. She had terrorized her neighbors for years with a simple method: sit in their courtyard, slap her thighs, and scream until they paid her to leave. Nobody challenged her because the exhaustion of dealing with her was worse than the cost of giving in. I was walking home with Wen behind me when I heard footsteps and then a thud. I turned around. My son was face down on the frozen road, mouth bleeding, rattle drum gone. Granny Li was standing over him, cursing. Born of a mother, but raised without one, she had pushed a 3-year-old to the ground, hard enough to split his lip. I put Wen behind my back, walked up to Granny Li, grabbed her hair, and kicked her in the mouth. She went down on the road, slapping her thighs, screaming for her sons. The Li family, 3 men, came running. Li Dangwei, the eldest, took one look at me and told his mother to go home. He had heard about Wang Qin's hair the night before. He knew exactly what kind of math I used. But Granny Li was not finished. Wang Qin had told her to go to my house and perform her routine: sit in my yard, cry, and scream, harass my wife, who had given birth 5 days ago. I saw them walking toward my gate from a distance. I jogged home the back way and warned Li Juan, no matter what you hear, don't come outside. I filled a bucket with water from the well, grabbed a ladle, went outside the gate and stood there, waiting. Granny Li appeared from behind the earthen wall. She hesitated when she saw me, but her script was her script. She charged forward, trying to get past me into the yard. I blocked her. She dropped to the ground, right there in the lane, slapped her thighs, and started wailing. I turned around, scooped up a ladle of water, and splashed it over her head. Dead winter, freezing cold. The water hit her face and soaked through her clothes. She gasped. Her screaming stopped. Grandma Li, I didn't mean anything by it. I just want to freeze you into an ice sculpture. Another ladle, another, until the bucket was empty. She sat there shaking, lips purple, every ounce of fight drained out of her. The Li men came running again. Father and eldest son carried her away. The second son, Dengshin, stared at me from the lane. I stared back. Your mother came to harass a woman who gave birth 5 days ago. If anyone steps into my yard and threatens my wife or children again, I don't care who they are. I will treat them worse. He left. Later, I heard shouting from across the village. Li Dangshin at Wang Qin's house, raising hell about who had put his mother up to this. Let them eat each other. Li Juan was terrified when I came back inside. Ningzi, I'm begging you, stop causing trouble. Let's get through the new year in peace. I put my arms around her shoulders. Juan, don't be afraid. I'm here. Nothing will happen to you. She looked up at me with those big, scared eyes. Then she took a breath and nodded. Not because she believed nothing would happen, because she believed I would be there when it did. That evening, while I was cooking noodles and minced meat sauce, Yue opened her eyes, 5 days old, and the first person she saw was me. Her dark little eyes stared up at my face, and I forgot how to breathe. Juan, Yue's eyes are open. She's looking at me. Li Juan laughed at how agitated I was. She could not understand why I was trembling over something that was bound to happen sooner or later, but she had not lived the other life. In that life, this girl never opened her eyes at all. She never breathed. She never existed. And now, she was staring at me with the most bewildered expression, like she was trying to figure out why this large, loud man was crying into her blanket. Yue, I'm your dad. Call me Dad. Ningzi, she can't call you Dad yet. She will. She'll call me Dad first, before she calls anyone else. On New Year's Eve morning, He Guomen and He Jun came one more time to take grandfather back. He Jun waved a stack of new 1 yuan bills in front of grandfather's face. He talked about tradition, about face, about how the family should gather at the eldest son's house. But when he said, "Grandpa, come back with me," the old man grabbed my arm with both hands and cried, "Ningzi, I'm not going back. I'm not going back." An 83-year-old man clinging to his grandson's arm, weeping because the alternative was a cold, dark room and no one checking if he was still alive. He Jun stared at his grandfather's tears and could not find a word to say. "Brother Jun," I said, "if you acknowledge Grandpa tonight, bring everyone to my house and wish him a happy new year. I'll serve good wine and good meat. If you don't, then don't come." He Gomin pulled his son away. They left, looking defeated. That afternoon, He Jun went around the village. He visited the village chief, then every uncle and cousin in the He family, one house at a time. He offered 50 yuan per person to boycott my house. He had a new TV in his Santana, a Changfeng brand, and he set it up in his father's main room, the pitch. Watch the Spring Festival Gala at my house, play cards, drink, and ignore He Ning entirely. I spent the afternoon pasting 5-colored paper on windows and hanging door gods, while my son systematically destroyed everything I put up. He burned one couplet with a stray coal. He dropped the door gods in the wind. He mixed up every color of paper I asked for. By the time I was done, my uncle, He Baoyin, had written me 3 replacement couplets, and the neighbors had a week's worth of gossip about He Ning's son. But inside the house, Li Juan was working like a woman possessed. She had laid out everything on the cutting board. Pork bones stewed tender, braised pig's trotters, cold shredded tripe, steamed meatballs, bean sprout salad, a whole fish. All morning she had been preparing, and when I complained about feeding the whole family our best food, she looked at me with eyes that were already shining. Ningxi, everyone is coming to wish Grandpa a happy new year tonight. I need to make the house lively. She wanted this more than she wanted rest, more than she wanted the food saved for herself and the children. For 4 years, she had lived in a house no one visited. The only face at the door was debt collectors. Now, for the first time, people might actually come, sit down, eat, talk to her like she mattered. I could not take that away from her. At dusk, I hung a red lantern under the eaves. First time in years, a lantern had glowed at my gate. No light bulb, so I wedged a candle inside, and the whole doorway turned a soft, hazy red. I dressed Wen in his newest clothes, put on my own clean jacket, loaded a bag with paper money, incense, and firecrackers, and walked with my son to the well bend at the edge of the village, where every He family descendant gathered on New Year's Eve to burn offerings to the ancestors. They were all there, my uncles, my cousins, my nephews, and they were all waiting, not to burn paper, to deliver an ultimatum. The village chief coughed. Ningxi, before we light the paper, can we make things clear? He Jun spoke next. He accused me of stealing grandfather for the New Year's gifts. He demanded I take the old man back to his father's house tonight. The village chief tried diplomacy. The uncles tried persuasion. Everyone had been briefed. Everyone had taken the 50 yuan. I fed my son a peanut, kissed his cheek, and listened to them talk. Then, He Jun made his final move. He took out 200 yuan and slipped it under my arm. Ningxi, take this. It's more than any relatives would bring. Just give Grandpa back. I took the money. Everyone watched me pocket it. He Jun smirked. Brother Jun, I said, I'll give this to Grandpa. Every penny. He's sitting on the kang right now with a fistful of 1 yuan bills, waiting to give his grandchildren New Year's money. But he's staying at my house? He Jun's face turned dark. He gave the final threat. If I would not surrender grandfather, I could burn my paper money alone. None of them would come to my house. I looked around. Not a single voice spoke in my defense. He Jun's 51 had bought their silence. So I walked 10 meters away, set down my bag, and burned my paper money alone. When Wen and I knelt in the dark, I lit incense for my parents and set off a string of firecrackers while my entire family watched from the other side of the riverbank. Then I stood up, walked back to them, and said what I came to say. My wife gave birth 5 days ago. She spent all afternoon bringing out every good thing in our house for tonight. Whether you come or not, that's your choice. But if you skip tonight and show up tomorrow, I will block the door and you will not get in. I turned and walked home, my son's head on my shoulder, firecrackers echoing behind me. Li Juan was waiting at the door, with her eyes bright. Ningxi, where are they? I lied, told her they were watching a skit on He Jun's new TV and would come after. Her eyes dimmed. They have a TV. They definitely won't come. She was ready to accept it, ready to eat the New Year's Eve dinner alone with her husband and grandfather and pretend it was enough. But I could see the disappointment pooling behind her eyes, and it cut me open. I was about to go to my second uncle's house and beg them to come, swallow my pride, swallow everything, when I heard voices at the gate, a crowd of them, uncles, cousins, nephews, their children. Li Juan's face lit up like a lantern. Ningxi, they're here. Serve the dishes. They had come. He Jun's 50 yuan could buy silence at the well, but it could not keep a man from visiting his own grandfather on New Year's Eve. One by one, the uncles had looked at each other after I left, and the village chief had said what everyone was thinking. If they skipped the old man tonight and He Ning barred them tomorrow, they would be the ones shamed, not He Ning. He Guoman and He Jun stayed away. Everyone else came. 17 people crowded into grandfather's room. They knelt and kowtowed. Happy New Year, Third Master. The children rushed forward, and grandfather pressed 1 yuan bills into their palms with shaking hands. Peanuts and candy overflowed from pockets. The room was louder than it had been in years. I moved the table to the center, and Li Juan began carrying dishes from the kitchen. Fish, pork bones, meatballs, braised trotters, steamed buns. The room smelled like everything she had been saving for this night. Village Chief Hefuyan frowned when Li Juan entered the main room. Niece-in-law, you can't be in here. The ancestral tablets. I poured wine, smiled, and said, Uncle Yin, without my wife, there is no He Ning, no son, no daughter. Why can't she come in? He opened his mouth, closed it. Someone in the back laughed. The old rules crumbled quietly, while Li Juan stood beside me, pouring wine into cups, her hands shaking with excitement. We toasted grandfather together, then my uncles, then my cousins. Li Juan said the blessing. Grandpa, I wish you a happy new year, good health, and a long life. When it was my turn to drink, I set my cup on the floor under the table. Ningxi, why aren't you drinking? I looked at Li Juan. I promised my wife. Not a drop of alcohol, not a single hand of cards. Tonight or any night. Li Juan tried to correct me. Ningzi, I didn't say you couldn't drink tonight. She reached into her pocket, ready to hand me money in case I wanted to gamble afterward. Her fingers trembled. She was already bracing for what always came next. Every new year before this one, I had disappeared for 4 days. Juan, I said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying here with you and Grandpa and our son and our daughter. The room went quiet. My uncles and cousins looked at me, then at Li Juan, then at Grandfather eating fish that Li Juan had deboned for him. The verdict moved through the room like a current. Ningzi is really different this year. Spoiling his wife and doting on his children. Never thought I'd see it. After they ate, they filed out into the cold night, heading to the 4th and 5th uncles' houses for more visits. The village chief stopped at the gate. Ningzi, take care of your wife. She's only a few days out. Li Juan watched me from the kitchen doorway. Ningzi, aren't you going with them? A whole table of messy dishes. You going to clean it all up alone? She reached into her pocket again, held out a fistful of coins. Ningzi, you don't lose it all. I looked at those coins in her palm. Every new year for 4 years, she had watched me take whatever money she had and vanish into a card game that lasted days. Every year she had said the same thing, don't lose it all, knowing I would. I pushed the coins back into her pocket. Juan, I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever again. She did not cry. She just looked at me for a long time, and then she turned and walked back to the kitchen to feed Yue Yue. Outside, the red lantern swayed under the eaves. Grandfather was asleep on the warm Kong, a pile of peanut shells on the table beside him. Wen had passed out against a cushion with candy wrappers stuck to his cheek. In my first life, this was the night everything ended, New Year's Eve. I had stormed out of this same house, screaming at Li Juan for not giving me gambling money. I did not come back for 4 days. By then, debt collectors had come. By then, Li Juan was dead. Now the same night held a different weight. Lantern light, fish bones on a clean table, my daughter breathing against my chest. My wife washing dishes in the kitchen, humming something I could not quite hear. Not a drop of alcohol, not a single hand of cards. The proving was not over. Wang Qin would not forget the hair. Granny Li's family would simmer. Zhang Aibo and the old gambling friends had not yet shown their faces. The world outside this door still had teeth, but inside this room, on this night, everyone was fed, everyone was warm, everyone was alive. That was the new year I had come back to give them. Phase 5, blood and business. On New Year's Eve, I had promised Li Juan I would never drink a drop or play a single hand of cards. She believed me. What she did not expect, what nobody in Chilipu village expected, was that I would wake up on the first morning of the Lunar New Year and go to work. Li Juan lay on the Kong that night, unable to sleep. She called me over, pulled out 100 yuan, and pressed it into my hand. Ningzi, go play with them. Here's 100. It's okay if you lose. I grinned. Give me another 200. Her fingers trembled. She pulled out 10 yuan bills one at a time until I had 300. Her voice cracked. Ningzi, you can't lose it all. I took the money. Then I turned around and washed a basin of diapers for our daughter. Her eyes went wide. Aren't you going out to play? When my sister comes tomorrow, I said, I'm going out to make money. I'll double this and buy you a TV. She stared at me for a long time. Then she pulled the blanket over her face, turned away, and cried without a sound, biting the edge of the cloth so I would not hear. I heard anyway. My sister, He Ning, arrived at dawn on the first day. She had driven her donkey cart 30 miles in the dark, certain she would find Li Juan weeping over gambling losses. Instead, she found a warm room, incense on the altar, and our grandfather still here, not taken back by second uncle's family. She lit incense, knelt before the offering table, and when she stood up, I was standing behind her, grinning. She screamed, "Are you crazy? Sneaking up behind me?" I hugged her. "Sis, I knew you'd come. Now I can finally go." "Go where? How much did you lose last night?" "I didn't play cards last night." She stared. She wanted so badly for that to be true. I made her brown sugar water with flower tea, told her Li Juan and the baby were fine, and then I did something that made her mouth fall open. While my sister was in the kitchen, I slipped out to Li Jiai's sheepfold next door. He was setting off firecrackers at his front gate. "Jiai, sell me those 2 lambs," he snorted. "He Ning, do you even have money?" I waved 300 yuan in his face, 4 yuan per jin gross weight. One weighed 48 jin, the other 43. 370 yuan, plus an extra 5 for the holiday. I carried both lambs home with their legs tied, took the knife from under the Kong, hauled them behind the mountain where my sister would not hear, and slaughtered them myself, bleeding, skinning, turning out the guts. In my first life, I had spent 3 years running mutton to Hui settlements near the mines. The muscle memory came back like I had never stopped. By mid-morning, 67 jin of fresh mutton sat in 2 bags. He Yan found me washing my arms. She saw the bags. Her mouth opened and closed. Ningzi, you've been slaughtering sheep? It's the first day of the Lunar New Year. That's inappropriate. I loaded the bags onto her donkey cart. Sister, when you're making big money, you can't be bothered by trifles. She watched me clatter down the slope. Her face was half worry, half wonder. 3.5 hours of dirt road through the snow. Here is what nobody in the village understood. During the Lunar New Year, every butcher shop in the county was closed. The Hui miners had cash and no vendor, no competitors, pure margin. I knew this from my first life, and I was starting a year early. I found the Ma brothers in their compound. Ma Chang's face was still black with coal dust from the night shift. I passed around Hong Tashan cigarettes and praised them as model workers. Brothers, on the first day of the Lunar New Year, who else is thinking of you? Fresh lamb, slaughtered this morning, not a drop of water added. Word traveled through the compound. Women came out. Miners drifted over. 67 jin sold in an hour at 9 yuan per jin. 600 yuan, cash. Ma Chang nodded. Bring 100 jin tomorrow. 10 yuan a jin for the next few days. 3.5 hours home. When I walked through the gate at dusk, He Yan was standing there holding Wen Wen, who was crying for his dad. I hugged my son, kissed his cheeks until he giggled. Then, my sister's patience ran out. Ningzi, how much did you make? About 300, I lied. She snatched the whole wad from my hand and counted it bill by bill. 600 yuan. She turned and ran to the kitchen. Juan, Ningzi made money. Look. Li Juan counted the bills one by one, straightening each note with shaking fingers. Her voice was barely controlled. Sister, 600 yen exactly. Doubled. I said, after you finish counting, give it back. Tomorrow I'll bring 1,000. The two of them made the same sound at the same time. A sharp intake of breath, like someone had slapped them. In 4 years of marriage, Li Juan had never held 1,000 yuan. In her whole girlhood, selling black melon seeds after the autumn harvest, the most she ever touched was 300 or 400. I peeled off 100 and walked to Aunt May's house. She was alone in the kitchen, everyone else playing cards. Auntie, I said, in my heart, you are not my wife's aunt. You are my mother. It's the new year, and I'm giving you this as a token of respect. You must accept it. She refused. Ningxi, once your house is built and life is truly better, then you can give me money. Aunt May, I'm carrying money and about to go visit relatives. If you don't take it, I'll lose it at the card table. She took it. She said she would save it for me. I knew she would not touch a penny. That evening, I carried Wen Wen to each relative's house for New Year greetings, and when I came to my fourth uncle's, I asked about grandfather. My fourth uncle's face told me something was wrong before his words did. He Jun had come in his black Santana that afternoon and picked up the old man, took him for a ride around the village, house to house, showing everyone what a dutiful grandson looked like with a car. The problem was that my grandfather had never ridden in a car in his 83 years of life. He got carsick. He vomited the moment he stepped out at sixth uncle's house. He Jun did not care. He dragged the old man back in and kept driving. Your grandpa gets carsick, my fourth uncle muttered. Junzi is just making things difficult for him. I put Wen Wen down and ran. At sixth uncle's house, the grandmother told me grandfather had sat inside for less than 5 minutes before He Jun hauled him away again. I tracked them by Wang Qin's voice. I could hear her screaming from 2 houses away. What I found at second uncle's house was worse than I feared. Grandfather lay curled in a small space on the edge of the kang, half conscious, half awake. His forehead was wrapped in gauze. He Guomen was standing with his arms limp, looking at the floor. Wang Qin was shrieking at He Jun about what to do with that old codger who's half dead. He Jun had been drinking. He had been driving drunk with an 83-year-old man in the car. The car had lurched on ice, or from a drunk man's hands, and the old man's head had struck something hard enough to break the skin. They had wrapped it in gauze and dumped him on the Kong. Wang Qin wanted him out of the house. He Guomen was asking his son what he had done. Nobody was asking grandfather if he was in pain. I kicked the door open and threw a punch at He Jun before he could turn his head. 2 hits, 3. He fell sideways onto the floor. Then, I looked at the ancestral altar on the offering table, the 8 steamed buns, the 4 bowls, the incense burner sending up a thin line of smoke to ancestors these people claimed to honor. I swept it all to the floor with my arm. The incense burner shattered on the brick. Yellow paper scattered like dead leaves. A steamed bun rolled under the Kong. What kind of ancestors do you worship? I said, when you can't even take care of the living one. Higomen's face went the color of ash. His eyes rolled back and he swayed. The village chief, He Fuyan, rushed in from the courtyard, stepped on a steamed bun, and stared at the wreckage. He Ning, it's the Lunar New Year. You dare destroy the ancestral table? This is a great disrespect to the He family clan. I ignored him. I squatted beside my grandfather and took his hand. Grandpa, let's go home. He wanly opened his eyes, saw me, and wept. Ningzi, take me away, take me away. The old man, white beard, trembling lips. He grabbed my arm with both hands and cried like a child. How much had he suffered in those few hours? Dragged into a car that made him sick, thrown around by a drunk man's driving, his head split open, and then dumped in a house where the woman of the household called him an old codger and wanted him gone. I turned to Wang Qin. Second aunt, did you take the money from my grandfather's pocket? She denied it. I grabbed her and shoved my hand into her coat. 200 yuan and a handful of change. The exact amount. The 200 from my third uncle and 50 from He Ning, stolen from an injured old man while he lay bleeding and half conscious. I put every yuan back in grandfather's pocket. Then I crouched, lifted him onto my back, and stood. He was light. That was the worst part. An 83-year-old man should not be this light. Step by step, I carried him out of that house and down the village road. The village chief followed behind, one hand under grandfather's back to keep him from sliding. He scolded me about the altar. I told him he was not a good village chief. He sighed. Ningzi, your second aunt said last night she didn't want the old man back. I came to check because I knew she'd make trouble. Then why did you push me to send him back on New Year's Eve? He had no answer for that. At home, I laid grandfather on the warm kang and covered him. He Yan cleaned the wound and applied medicine. The cut was shallow, chafed skin, nothing deep. But the terror in the old man's eyes was deep. He kept muttering, Ningzi, I won't ride in the car. I won't go anywhere. Don't let them take me. I told him nobody would take him anywhere. In my first life, grandfather died on the 8th day of the first lunar month, 8 days from now. I did not know if changing the timeline had moved that date. I only knew that under my roof, he ate a poached egg every morning, drank hot tea, wore new silk-padded clothes, and slept on a warm kang. I would watch over him every day until the 8th passed. If it passed, that was the best I could do. That night, Yang Biao came to my door. He brought 2 of his followers, Li Guangping and Wang Yuande, carrying a bottle of Huangtai liquor and a deck of cards. They bowed before the altar, ate the noodles my sister served them, and then Yang Biao held the open bottle under my nose. The smell hit me like a fist, rich, warm, pulling. My body trembled. I wanted it, but I set the cup of wine on the floor beneath the offering table, untouched. Yang Biao, I won't drink anymore. Before my wife gave birth, I promised her. Not a drop, not even during the new year. His eyes went cold. He Ning, on the first day of the lunar new year, you drink this bottle with us and play 1 game of cards, and we'll call it even. If I don't drink or gamble, I said, what grudge do we have? He Yan pulled at my arm. Ningzi, play cards here. I won't scold you. I stood up. Yang Biao, Li Guangping, Wang Yuande. On the first day of the lunar new year, you offered incense and kowtowed before my family's altar. I fed you noodles with meat sauce. That was all I could do. Now it's time for you to leave. The room went silent. Yang Biao's face was ugly. He Ning, he said. That day in December when you ran into me, you turned your back on me. I thought you were joking, but you really turned your back on me? After the 3-day holiday, I said, I'll make it clear. But if you insist on playing cards and making me lose money tonight, don't blame me for ignoring the fact that it's New Year's Day. Wang Yuande dragged Yang Biao out. They left. He Yan scolded me for being a scoundrel. I told her the truth. These men were not my friends. They were the disease I had cured myself of. From the 23rd of the 12th month onward, I had severed every tie. No ambiguity, no going back. She fell quiet. Then she sighed. Ningzi, she said, as long as you don't drink or lose money, as long as you cherish Juan and the 2 children, I don't care about your second uncle and aunt. I don't care about Yang Biao. None of it matters. The next morning, she beat me with a rolling pin when she found out I had overturned second uncle's altar. It hurt. I hid behind Li Juan, but when I explained about He Jun's drunk driving and grandfather's injury, she put the rolling pin down. Forget it, she said. I won't go to second uncle's house to wish them a happy new year. On the second day of the lunar new year, I woke to snow falling past the 5-colored paper in the kitchen window. Red, yellow, purple, green, blue. The world outside was gray and quiet. I pulled the slaughtering knife from under the kang felt and tucked it into my waistband. He Yan pushed open the kitchen door. Ningzi, it's snowing. Are you still going? Sister, I promised you and Juan 1,000 yuan tonight. I'm going. She poured a can of hot tea into my hand and tightened the cap. If the snow gets heavy and you can't come back this afternoon, sister, take care of my wife, kids, and grandfather. I'll be back. I drove the donkey to Wang Yuancheng's house and bought 3 lambs for 500 yuan. A frightened lamb cried, Mama, so pitifully that he had to tie its mouth shut. I slaughtered all 3 on the road, packed 100 jin of mutton into bags at the mining area before noon. 100 jin at 10 yuan per jin, 1,020 yuan. I owed Wang Yuansheng 50 and borrowed 30 from Ma Qiang to round the figure to a clean 1,000. It had to be exact. My wife and sister would count every bill that night. Ma Qiang warned me as I packed to leave. Brother, once you leave the mining area, there are robbers on the Li Juan slope, about 20 li ahead. They call themselves the 8 Great Vajras. You worked so hard to earn this money. Don't let them take it. I knew about the 8 Great Vajras. In my first life, they had robbed me on this exact road 1 year from now. I had lost over 1,000 yuan. 6 months after that, a crackdown came through. The leader, Huang Zhonghe, and a man named Chang Yuming were shot. The rest got 5 years or more, but they were already operating now. Ma Qiang told me to wait until 4, when the robbers would leave. 3 hours of waiting, 3 hours home. I would arrive after dark. My wife would be sick with worry. I was not going to wait. I unhitched the donkey, left the cart at Ma Qiang's, and led the animal into the mountains. Not a road, a series of barren ridges and goat trails I had walked for decades in my first life. Paths not on any map, known only to someone who had spent 30 years crossing these hills on foot. The route bypassed the Li Juan slope entirely, an hour and a half of climbing. Donkey hooves slipping on frozen rock, but bandit-free. Before I left the compound, I kept my promise to Wen Wen. Ma Qiang's female dog had whelped 8 puppies behind the bungalow. I squatted down and made 2 squeaking sounds. A jet black puppy with reddish-gray paws broke away from the pack and crawled into my hands. "Hey Z," I said, "you're the one." I tucked him inside my coat and led the donkey into the mountains. On the other side, I walked into the Gaoya town department store and bought 2 pounds of flour tea, the 10 yuan per pound kind. That left exactly 1,000. That evening, I put Heizi on the ground in the courtyard and called Wen Wen out. His eyes went as round as eggs. "Daddy, little puppy, Wen Wen likes it." He grabbed Heizi and the puppy licked his cheek, and they were inseparable from that moment on. The neighbor children, Aunt May's 3 kids, crowded around. My courtyard was full of shrieking, laughing children and a puppy no bigger than a man's shoe. Inside the kitchen, my wife and sister were waiting for only one thing. I made them wait a little longer, played with Wen Wen in the snow, carried my daughter, ate 2 meatballs standing up. He Yan's patience finally cracked. "Ningzi, we've been waiting since this morning. Do you know how much we've been suffering?" I pulled the wad from my pocket. Hundreds, 50s, 10s, a thick stack. Li Juan asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Sister, is it really 1,000? Don't rush me. I'm counting." He Yan laid each bill flat and counted. Li Juan watched with her hands clasped together. I stood on the edge of the Kong and memorized their faces. During the day, the donkey had waddled along frozen blocked roads, and I had panted my way up mountainsides. But all I could think about, every step, was this moment. My sister counting money, my wife's face flushed with disbelief. The number had to be exact. "Exactly 1,000, He Yan said. She frowned. "What a coincidence. I bought 2 packets of flour tea and paid Wang Yuansheng 50. That's why it's exact." Li Juan counted again, slowly, 1,000 yuan. She took it all, added it to the cash from the day before, and said, "Ningzi, I'll keep this 1,000. You keep 500 for tomorrow's capital." He Yan slapped my arm. "All the money goes to your wife. I don't want a penny." But she smiled when she said it. She counted that money as carefully as if it were hers. The process was the point. Watching her brother earn it honestly, watching the numbers prove that the change was real. What I did not know at the time, but learned that same afternoon, was that Zhang Aibo had watched me leave with lambs at dawn. He ran to Wang Yuansheng, bought the remaining 5 lambs with Heijun's money, loaded them onto his father's mule cart, and drove straight toward the mining area, straight down the Li Juan slope. He did not know about the mountain shortcut. He did not know about the 8 Great Vajras. He knew the destination and the price, but nothing about the road. At the top of the slope, 3 men stepped out of the elm groves, masks, yellow coats. They greeted Zhang Aibo cheerfully. "Brother, Happy New Year." He greeted them back and asked them to help push the cart. They did. Then 2 more appeared. 5 men, all masked, surrounded his mule cart, and each one picked up a lamb. Zhang Aibo froze for 10 seconds. Then he understood. "My heroes," he said. "Consider it my New Year's gift to you." He clutched the mule's reins. Livestock was a farmer's lifeblood, and backed away. They let him keep the mule. But here was the part that made my blood run cold when I learned it later. Before he left, Zhang Aibo turned and shouted at the robbers, "There's a donkey cart coming right behind me. The guy has 1,000 yuan on him. Wait here." He sold me out, a man I had drunk with for years, played cards with for years. He walked away from the robbers having lost 5 lambs, and his parting gift was to point them at me. I had already taken the mountain road. They waited for me until dark. I never came. Zhang Aibo limped home to find He Jun waiting for his money. There was no money. 940 yuan, gone. He Jun grabbed Zhang Aibo by the collar and searched his pockets. Nothing. The two of them screamed at each other in front of Zhang Aibo's house, while the whole village gathered to watch. I walked into the middle of it, grinning. Zhang Aibo, I said, you sold 5 lambs to the Hui miners for more than 200 each. That's over 1,000 yuan. You wanted to keep it all. You told He Jun you were robbed. What kind of lie is that? Zhang Aibo's eyes went wide. He Jun's face reddened. Neither of them could tell if I was telling the truth or stirring the pot. I was stirring the pot. I flashed the wad of cash from my pocket, 500 yuan bills and change, right in front of both of them, proof I had not been robbed. Then I walked out. Behind me, the argument got louder. He Jun believed Zhang Aibo had stolen his money. Zhang Aibo was telling the truth about the robbers, but no one would believe him because I had just told them he was lying. On the 3rd day of the Lunar New Year, I rose before dawn. Grandfather was already up beside me on the kang, sipping tea by the stove, the way he did every morning, an old man's unchanging habit. I washed his face, shaved his beard, and checked his forehead. The wound had scabbed over, nothing serious. At 83, with a warm body and a full stomach, what could happen on the 8th day of the month? I was beginning to believe he would make it. I tucked the slaughtering knife into my waistband, reached my left hand in, and practiced the draw. Coat sleeve long enough to hide the blade, grip smooth enough to clear the belt without snagging. Good. Then the slingshot went into the back of my belt with 5 bicycle valve cores tied to the fork as ammunition. I was not planning to avoid the robbers anymore. The donkey carried 100 jin of mutton, too heavy for the mountain ridges. I would cross the Luojiawan slope on the main road, let them come. That morning, I sourced lambs from old man Zhang Mao in Shaoshui village, my brother-in-law's neighbor, who had a dozen lambs fattened for market that the Hui collectors had never picked up because of the December snow. 3 lambs, bled and processed at his sheepfold in half an hour. He watched me work, impressed. I loaded 100 jin onto the donkey and headed for the mining area. At the Luojiawan slope, around 9 in the morning, I reached into my coat and gripped the knife handle, drew it, sheathed it. No snag. Nobody was there. The elm groves were empty, the road quiet. Sold the 100 jin, 1,030 yuan. Made up the shortfall selling 3 portions of offal in Shaoshui village on the way back. A clean 1,000. But on the 4th day, they were waiting, not at the Luojiawan slope. They had found my footprints on the mountain shortcut and repositioned. 5 men in yellow coats and masks, blocking the road I had thought was mine alone. Their leader, a man named Huang Zhonghe, stepped forward. Brother, Happy New Year, wishing you prosperity. I stopped the donkey, tucked my hands into my sleeves. Happy New Year, Brother Huang. He froze. I knew his name. You're the 8 great Vajras of the county, I said. Started by charging tolls for coal trucks, and now you've moved on to handcarts and bicycles. I'm curious, why are there only 5 of you instead of 8? He recovered. His voice went flat. You know what we're going to do, and you still came. Aren't you afraid? I bowed my head like a scared man and mumbled about elderly parents and young children. Food for the family, just a few yuan. Please, let me go. I talked slowly. I talked long. I needed them bored and close. 3 of them were within arm's reach now. 2 stood farther back on either side of the road. Huang Zhonghe snapped. Stop talking nonsense. Hand over the money. I reached into my coat. The sleeves of a padded cotton jacket are long. They hid my forearm completely. My fingers found the knife handle, wrapped around it, drew it along my waist. I stabbed Huang Zhonghe in the thigh. The blade went in and came out in one motion. He screamed, a high, sharp sound that split the frozen air. Before the other 2 beside me could process what had happened, I pivoted left and stabbed, pulled out, pivoted right and stabbed. 1 stab, pull, another stab, pull. 3 screams, 3 men on the ground, clutching their thighs, blood soaking through yellow coats and spreading into the snow. The red was vivid against the white. He had a knife. He was prepared. I jumped back several meters, sheathed the knife in my waistband, and drew the slingshot from the back of my belt. The loaded valve core sat in the leather pouch. My hands were still inside my sleeves. They could not see what I held. The 2 remaining men rushed to their fallen leader. Kill him! Huang Zhonghe shouted from the ground. Go kill him! One of them came running. He was holding a large machete, the kind butchers use, and his footsteps crunched heavy on the frozen road. I turned and ran. Let him think I was fleeing. Let him close the distance. 5 meters behind me. 4. I spun, drew the slingshot to full extension. The rubber stretched past my ear. Snap. The valve core struck him between the eyebrows. His head snapped back, then his body pitched forward. He dropped half kneeling, half collapsed, the machete clattering from his hand onto the ice. He was not unconscious, but he was not getting up for a while. The last man stopped dead. He stared at the slingshot in my hand. "Slingshot?" he said. I bent down and picked up the fallen machete. It was heavy, good steel. I spread my legs, set my weight, and faced him. "Come on, brother. If I turn and run again, I'm not my mother's son." He looked at the machete in my hand. He looked at the slingshot in my other hand. He looked at his 3 bleeding friends on the ground. He turned and ran down the road without another word. I stood over Huang Zhonghe and looked down at him. Blood was pooling under his leg. His face was white. "Huang Zhonghe," I said, "I'm saving your life today. Of the 8 of you, you and Chang Yuming were shot in the crackdown. The others got at least 5 years. But if your thigh puts you out of commission for 6 months, maybe you won't be around to do whatever gets you that bullet." He did not understand what I meant. He would, in time. I took his watch, gold-colored, stolen from a coal truck driver. I took 2 yellow coats from his injured men. I took the cash from his pocket, payment for the 5 lambs they had robbed from Yang Biao, which was not their money to keep. I deducted 100 yuan for my nephew's New Year gifts. Then, I drove the donkey cart to the police station in Gaoya Town and handed over the machete, the coats, the watch, and the rest of the money. "Officers," I said, "please get up there fast or they'll bleed to death." 2 Santana police cars screamed out of the station lot. I turned the donkey toward Xiaoshui village to pick up my niece, Minner, as my sister had asked. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with another 1,000 yuan in front of me. My hands still had a faint tremor, not from the cold, from what I had done that morning. Li Juan did not notice. She counted the bills with the same careful reverence she had shown every night since the first day. He Ning watched over her shoulder, her face softened by something I could only call peace. Wen chased Hazy around the courtyard, shouting the dog's name, while the neighbor children followed in a shrieking pack. Grandfather sipped tea in the main room, his forehead scabbed but healing. The old man had made it past the first day of the month, past the second, past the third, past the 4th. 8 more days until the date I feared, but he was eating well, sleeping warm, and the terror in his eyes was fading. He had stopped asking me not to let them take him. Yue slept against Li Juan's chest, her tiny fist curled around a fold of cloth. My daughter, the one who had died before she was born in my first life. Here she was, breathing, growing, alive. Some nights I held her just to feel the warmth of her body and listen to the sound of air moving in and out of lungs that had never existed in the world I came from. Somewhere across the village, Yang Biao was still trying to explain to He Jun how he had lost 940 yuan. He Jun did not believe him. Yang Biao's father was shouting at his son about the mule. He Jun's mother, Wang Qin, was shouting at everyone. I had not set any of that in motion. Yang Biao chose to copy my route. Yang Biao chose to take the main road. Yang Biao chose to point the robbers at me, told them a donkey cart was coming with 1,000 yuan. Wait here. The 8 great Vajras chose the Li Juan slope. Every piece fell where it was already going to fall. I just knew where the pieces would land, and I said nothing. Some of you will say I should have warned him. He was my drinking buddy for years. We had played cards at the same table 100 times. Maybe I owed him that, but he told highway robbers where to find me. He pointed armed men at someone with a wife recovering from labor, a newborn daughter, a 3-year-old son, and an injured 83-year-old grandfather at home. He did it because I made more money than him and refused to play cards with him. That was his reason. I did not owe Yang Biao a warning. I owed my family 1,000 yuan and a safe road home. I owed my son a puppy. I owed my sister flower tea. I owed my wife a TV. I owed my grandfather another morning, and another after that, for as many mornings as I could give him. Those debts I paid, every day, in blood if necessary. Outside, snowflakes drifted past the 5-colored paper in the kitchen window. Red, yellow, purple, green, blue. In my first life, I had sat in a glass-walled office on the 48th floor, watching traffic crawl along a freeway, answering phone calls that never ended. Someone had called me General Manager He. I had hated it. I had missed this, the mud house, the paper windows, the sound of my son laughing in a courtyard full of children, and a black puppy no bigger than a shoe. I had it back now. The proving was not over. The lamb runs would continue. New threats would rise, and the knife in my waistband would need cleaning more than once before spring. But inside this house, on this night, everyone was fed, warm, and alive. And anyone who tried to take that from me would find out what I had already shown the 8 great Vajras on that frozen mountain road. I was not the man they remembered. I was the man who came back. Phase 6, the provider. On the 4th morning of the Lunar New Year, I did not go to the mines. My daughter was 10 days old. Her face had changed. Rosy cheeks, dark eyes that followed me across the room, a tiny mouth making soft woo-woo sounds like she was trying to tell me something. I picked her up, pressed my face against her swaddling and breathed in the milky scent. "Hey, who are you looking at? Daddy, I'm your daddy. I'll play with you all day today." Li Juan stood on the edge of the Kong, drinking noodle soup. "Don't shake her. If she gets used to being rocked, you'll have to hold her every time." I didn't care. I walked from one end of the Kong to the other, cradling my daughter, while my wife and sister watched me with expectant eyes. "Why are you two staring at me like I've got money on me?" "You do have money," He Ning said. 1,000 yuan. Same ritual as every night. I pulled the bills from my coat, counted them on the quilt. 1,000 yuan, not a penny, more or less. He Ning took her portion. I had given her 1,000 to hold for the family. Li Juan took hers. Two petty women, counting bills by candlelight, building something they had never had before. That evening, I did something Li Juan found mortifying. I filled the wash basin, set it on a stool beside the Kong, and pulled her feet into the warm water. "What are you doing?" She yanked her foot back like I had bitten it. "Washing your feet. You're in postpartum. Bending over will hurt your back. Your sister is right next door." The door creaked. He Ning pushed through the curtain. Minner was thirsty. She glanced at the overturned basin, the water pooling on the dirt floor, my wife's crimson face. "Ningzi, are you washing Juan's feet?" Li Juan's denial came out strangled. No. How could Ningzi wash my feet?" He Ning scooped her water and left. "Fine, I'll leave you to it. Take good care of Juan." After the door closed, Li Juan glared at me. "I told you not to." Now she saw. I understood later why she was mortified. If she had been kneeling to wash my feet, the village would have called that normal. A man kneeling to wash a woman's feet, she would lose face for a year. But I washed them anyway and soaked them for half an hour, and she stopped protesting somewhere around minute 10. Before dawn on the 5th day, I loaded the donkey cart and headed to Shaoshui village for 3 more lambs. I sold everything at the Han Chinese residential area of the mining district, a new market. The Hui miners were saturated, but the Han families had money and no vendor. The women there were loud and aggressive. They grabbed at the mutton, complained about hair stuck to it, haggled over every fen. But between the insults, one of them asked a question that changed everything. "Young man, can you bring us piglets?" Piglets. Of course, every family in every village needed 2 piglets for the next year's pork. The roads from the county pig farms were snowed shut. No trucks could get through. But a donkey cart could. A mule cart could. I tucked that thought away and drove home. 7 bowls of noodles with minced meat sauce that night. My wife and sister were convinced I had starved all day. They were right. I had eaten 5 fried dough sticks the previous morning and nothing since. My aunts came that afternoon, He Jinlian and He Jinhong, my grandfather's 2 daughters. They had bicycled in from their married homes, and they walked into my courtyard for the first time in years. He Ning and I braced for an interrogation. These were the women who had cut ties with me when I was a drunk, but they saw grandfather at the dining table, eating dumplings, wearing clean new clothes, smiling. He Jinlian pressed 50 yuan into Li Juan's hand. My wife refused it without blinking. Ningzi and I are taking care of my grandfather willingly, cold as January frost. My wife, the woman who used to tremble when strangers raised their voices, looked my aunt in the eye and turned down money she could have used. He Jinlian left that 50 yuan in grandfather's palm instead and said just one sentence to me and He Ning. "Ningzi, Yanzi, Grandpa will be relying on you two from now on. No lecture, no blame. They had seen enough." Earlier that same week, I had visited Grandma Zhang's house with a red envelope, 88 yuan inside, handed over with both hands, while her sons and sons-in-law mocked me from around the table. He Ning went to the mining area to make money on the first day of the Lunar New Year? How much did you lose on New Year's Eve? He Ning, is the money you've earned enough to pay off Yang Biao? I endured every word. I lit incense at their altar, knelt down with my son, and told Grandma Zhang she had saved my wife's life. Her family watched me leave, 88 yuan in a red envelope, from the village drunk. They talked about it for days after. The tone shifted from mockery to something I could live with. Confusion. Then 2 things hit on the same afternoon. The Li family, Granny Li's sons, had gone to the Gaoya town police station to report me for pouring cold water on their mother. She had pneumonia now. They wanted money. But when the police heard the name He Ning from Shilipu, they told the Li brothers something that emptied the blood from their faces. The man they were reporting had just killed 4 highway robbers in self-defense and was being considered for a commendation. The Li brothers left the station without another word and hid inside their house. The village chief told me this at my front gate, still panning from his walk back from town. His eyes were different now, not the usual weary tolerance, but something edged with fear and a new, careful respect. "Ningzi, you really did it? Uncle Village Chief, there's a misunderstanding. They're just injured. Nobody died." He stared at me for a long time. Then he told me the second thing. The town was demanding a 500 yuan deposit. My wife had given birth to 2 children. The policy required her to undergo a procedure unless I paid. 500 yuan to protect Li Juan from being dragged to a clinic. I paid it on the 7th day of the first lunar month, drove the mule cart to town with my nephew Bai Bai, walked into the government compound, and handed the money to Cadre Xiaodu. She gave me a receipt and 2 boxes and told me to follow the instructions. I put the boxes in my pocket and walked out. Before I left the building, I pulled out a pencil stub that Bai Bai had been about to throw away. I wrote a small character on the corner of every bill in my pocket. He, our family name. Every 100 yuan note, every 50, every 10. Call it instinct. Call it 30 years of knowing what kind of men wait outside government buildings. On the 6th day of the Lunar New Year, the Yangliu village folk performance troupe came to Shilapu. Li Juan was beside herself with excitement. The troupe was from her hometown village. She knew the performers. She had been a land boat girl herself 4 years ago. She wanted them to see that her family had joined in the celebration, that she was not the abandoned wife of a drunk anymore. I paid 35 yuan for the whole family, 5 yuan per head, 7 people, including He Ning and Minner. My sister tried to exclude herself. "We're relatives, not your family." "Aren't you my family?" I said. She stopped arguing. The drums thundered. 2 fiery red lions danced at our gate. 6 colorful land boats drifted into our courtyard. Li Juan pulled Minner under the lion's belly for luck, freedom from illness and disaster. I tried to push Wenwen through too, but my son buried his face in my neck and screamed, "Daddy, Wenwen is scared. Hug me." I held him tight. Okay, no more lions. Daddy was teasing you." A big-headed doll performer, one of them, flicked his horsehair whisk across Wenwen's face as he passed. My son's eyes went red. He couldn't open them. He wailed. I tracked that man. After the troupe left our courtyard, I followed behind him, pulled off his big-headed doll helmet, and put 2 punches into his eye sockets before anyone noticed. Then, I put the helmet back on his head and walked away while the gongs and drums drowned out his complaints. Li Juan told me later, quietly, "That guy was angry I married you." I said nothing. He would think twice before swinging a whisk at a 3-year-old again. But the folk performance chaos cost me something else. The drums and firecrackers spooked my sister's donkey. It snapped its reins and bolted into the wilderness. He Ning and I chased it for hours, across the white earth line, through frozen scrubland, past the village, and out toward Xiaoshui village. I couldn't get close. Every time I approached, it turned its head and ran. "This donkey has gone mad," I muttered, bent over and panting. "When I find it, I'm replacing it with a mule." He Ning looked like she wanted to murder the animal. It does this every year when the gongs start. In the end, my nephew Bai Bai saved us. I had brought the boy from He Yan's house the night before, and on the road back, there stood the donkey, chewing camel husks in a field. Bai Bai walked straight up and grabbed the broken reins. The beast that had evaded 2 adults all afternoon let a 10-year-old boy lead it home. "Besides my dad and me," Bai Bai said. "Once it runs, nobody else can get near it." That evening, after the donkey was tied up and fed, after He Ning had stopped cursing, after the noodles were eaten and the coal was banked, I lay on the kang with my son. Wenwen's eyes had recovered from the whisk. He was sitting up, playing with the burnt stubs of firecrackers, crumbling them between his fingers. He Zi the puppy was circling the kang trying to climb up. These past few days, something had shifted in my son. He talked to me now without stuttering. He followed me around the courtyard. He fell asleep in my arms without flinching. The boy who had cried at my voice 12 days ago now shouted, "Daddy!" the moment I walked through the gate. He wanted me to hold him everywhere, to Grandma Zhang's house, to the shop for balloons, to the jujube orchard to set off firecrackers. When I put him down, he shook his arms and wailed until I picked him up again. "Daddy, hug me!" every single time. I never said no, not once. I lay on my stomach and nuzzled his belly. He shrieked with laughter, grabbed my ears, kicked his legs. "Son, was the lion scary? The lion's mouth is so big." He spread his arms wide. I nuzzled him again. He laughed so hard he hiccuped. Then, he wrapped both arms around my head and squeezed. "Good dad." I froze. The room went silent. Even the coal in the stove seemed to stop crackling. When, what did you just say?" He didn't answer. He was already reaching for the puppy, which had finally scrambled onto the kang. His attention had moved on. He was 3 years old. He had said it the way a child says anything, because it was true in that moment, because his belly was warm and his father's face was pressed against it, and the word came out before thinking could ruin it. Li Juan's voice, very quiet, from the other end of the kong. He said, "You're a good dad." I could not speak. My throat closed. I sat up slowly and held my son against my chest. pressing my face into his hair, that thin, yellowish hair that smelled like coal smoke and milk and home. In my first life, Wen was 33 years old when he stood beside my hospital bed. I was dying, tubes in my arms, monitors beeping. I asked him to call me Dad, just once. He looked at me with eyes that held 30 years of abandonment, 30 years of a drunk who chose cards and bottles over his own child. And he said, "I will never acknowledge you as my father." Then I died. Then I came back. 12 days. That is how long it took in this life. 12 days of cooking porridge, hauling carts through mountains, washing diapers at midnight, buying a puppy, playing in the snow, fighting men who threatened this house. 12 days of being present. 12 days of being the father I never was. And my 3-year-old son, who cannot read or count past 10, who cries when lions dance and laughs when his belly is tickled. This boy looked at me and decided I was good. 2 words. The opposite of a deathbed curse. I held him until he fell asleep. Li Juan said nothing more. She knew, somehow, that I was somewhere she could not follow, that the tears running into my son's hair came from a place she had never seen. The morning after, I went back to work. There was no time for sentiment when piglets needed hauling. On the 7th day of the Lunar New Year, I drove to town with Bai to pay the 500 yuan deposit. My brother-in-law Zhang Dongping had come along, reluctantly, complainingly, until I sent him home at the crossroads because his whining was unbearable. After paying Xiaodu, I walked out of the government compound. That's when the parted hair lackey spotted me and ran inside to tell Yang Biao. They caught up to us on the road outside town, 5 men. Yang Biao in front, his usual smooth smile in place. He Ning, you've made some money. Aren't you going to treat your brothers to drinks? Bai gripped my sleeve. Uncle, don't be scared, I told him quietly. Then I took my 510 yuan, every bill marked with the character he in pencil, and handed it over. Yang Biao split the money among 3 men. He was already turning to leave when the police Santana pulled up behind us. Director Luo stepped out. He was new, transferred in during the 12th lunar month, running a crackdown on thugs and robbers. He had come to find me personally, to deliver a 500 yuan reward for fighting the 8 great Vajras. Instead, he found Yang Biao's crew surrounding my cart. Yang Biao, what are you doing blocking He Ning's way? Yang Biao grinned. Just greeting a friend, Director Luo. I spoke clearly. He threatened my nephew and stole my money. Yang Biao's face went white. Who stole your money? Search me. 510 yuan, I said. Every bill has the character he written in pencil on the corner. He split it among 3 men. Check their pockets. They checked. Bill by bill, corner by corner. 12 notes with my family name in pencil lead. Exactly 512 yuan. Yang Biao tried to run. The handcuffs came out. He Ning, this is a misunderstanding. I was borrowing. Also, I said, loud enough for Director Luo to hear. On the 20th of the 12th lunar month, he went to the Huang and Wang family homes to collect debts and raped 2 young wives. Director Luo, robbery and rape. I don't need to elaborate on the charges. They pushed Yang Biao into the back of the Santana. I called after him through the window. Yang Biao, if you want to settle accounts with me, come back in 10 years. In my first life, Yang Biao's arrest happened 8 months later, during the autumn crackdown. His debt had hung over my family like a blade for those 8 months. Li Juan lived in terror of his collectors every day until autumn. This time, I erased him on the 7th day of the 1st lunar month. The IOU I had eaten was ash. The man who wrote it was in handcuffs. My wife would never know his name again. After Yang Biao was dragged away, I drove to the county seat with Bai, 40 miles by mule cart. We ate beef noodles, 3 bowls, and a pound of braised beef for 12 yuan. I bought toys for every child in the family. A submachine gun for Bai, a toy revolver for Wen, a red hair clip for Minner, pendant earrings for Li Juan, a bow tie for He Yan, little clothes for Yue, and a back scratcher for grandfather. Over 20 yuan for the lot. Then I went to see Han Yukin at the county pig farm. Uncle Chin, I need 100 piglets. He laughed. Young man, you can't pull 100 piglets on a mule cart. I pointed at his tractor. Lend me that. It took negotiation. He did not know me. I mentioned old Mao, the man who would become my rival in the piglet business a year from now. Han Yukin's face brightened at the name, but he still would not let me drive his tractor away for 500 yuan and a handshake. So I left my mule, my cart, and my nephew as collateral. Bye. You stay here and take care of the mule. I'll pick you up tomorrow. He clutched his submachine gun and accepted the assignment like a soldier. Han Yukin's wife loaded 100 piglets into cages on the tractor flatbed. I climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. In my first life, I drove tractors for 5 years, 3-wheelers for 8, then cars, then excavators. I ran construction sites. I became a boss. All that knowledge lived in my hands. The clutch, the throttle, the gear shift. muscle memory from a life that had not happened yet. The tractor coughed black smoke and lurched onto the road. Han Yukin stared after me, then turned to bye-bye. Does your uncle's family have a tractor? No. Has he ever driven one? Never. At the mining area, the women swarmed the tractor before I could even set the brake. They grabbed at the piglets, argued over the fattest ones, cursed me for charging 25 yuan apiece. I stood on the flatbed and shouted until they formed a line. 80 piglets, sold in an hour. The remaining 20 I kept for the village. On the way home, I stopped at the police station and collected my 500 yuan reward, the commendation for fighting the 8 great Vajras. The policewoman tossed the money at me with a glare, but I did not care. 500 out in the morning for the deposit, 500 back by evening from the reward. The universe had balanced the books. At the production zone near the mines, I noticed a face I recognized, a worker loading coal, going by the name Pisan. He kept his head down, avoided eye contact, worked twice as hard as anyone around him. But I knew that face from my first life. His real name was Hu Xiangdong, and he was a fugitive, wanted for a stabbing 3 provinces away. In my first life, he was caught 6 months from now. The reward was 10,000 yuan. I filed the information away and kept driving. The tractor rumbled into Shilapu village after dark. Wang Qin heard the engine and came out of second uncle's courtyard, craning her neck. Selling piglets? How much? I pulled off my face mask. Second aunt, 50 yuan each, cash only. Come to my door if you want one. Her face went rigid. She stepped aside. I drove past without slowing. Women from the village gathered at the bottom of the slope near my gate, listening to the piglets squeal in their cages. These are good piglets, bigger than the ones I bought last year. That's He Ning's tractor? When did he learn to drive? Nonsense. That rascal can't drive. Then who's driving it? I parked the tractor, climbed the slope, and walked into my courtyard. Li Juan was at the gate before I reached it. Ningzi, you're finally back. I was so worried. I kissed her forehead. Then I went inside and told my sister everything. The brother-in-law sent home at the crossroads, the deposit paid, Yang Biao arrested, the piglets sold, the nephew safe at the pig farm, the tractor borrowed, the reward collected. He Yan listened with her mouth slightly open. Ningzi, she said finally, is there anything about you that I don't know? I thought about that for a moment. The tractor, the driving, the knife skills, the dumpling making, the construction management, the 30 years of future knowledge compressed into the body of a 23-year-old farmer. There are plenty more, sis. Don't let me scare you. That night, Li Juan counted the money, all of it, the piglet sales, the reward, minus the deposit, and the piglets still owed to Han Yukin. We were ahead. We were more than ahead. We had built something in 12 days that most families in the village could not build in a year. I lay on the keng, my son asleep against my chest, my daughter in her swaddling beside my wife, my sister in the next room, my grandfather snoring gently on his kong. The coal stove ticked, wind pushed against the paper windows, the ones Wen had poked holes in, the ones I had patched with red paper strips. Good dad, 2 words, still echoing. In my first life, I chased money across provinces, slept in construction trailers, ate instant noodles for dinner, and called my son twice a year on birthdays he stopped answering. I built an empire and lost everything that mattered. On my deathbed, the only words I wanted to hear were the ones my son refused to say. In this life, I hauled lambs on a donkey cart, washed my wife's feet, punched a man for swinging a whisk at my toddler, and drove a borrowed tractor through the dark with 20 piglets squealing behind me. I had nothing. A mud house with paper windows, a borrowed mule, a sheepskin coat that smelled like blood, and my son called me good. That was enough. That was everything. That was the reason I came back. The tractor rumbled into the village after dark, loaded with 20-odd piglets and half a carriage of coal. I pulled off my hat and mask at the front gate, and before I could even call out, Wen came running across the courtyard. Dad, it's a toy gun! He grabbed the red toy revolver from my hand and spun in circles. My son's voice came out clear and smooth. 2 weeks ago, he could barely string 3 words together. Now he was chattering sentences, pronouncing every syllable, his little mouth going nonstop. Something had changed in him since the night he called me good dad. The fear was gone. In its place, trust. The kind of trust that made a 3-year-old run toward his father instead of away. I'd brought gifts for everyone. A bamboo back scratcher for grandfather, who laughed until his white beard trembled and called it the filial piety stick. A red hair clip for Minner, who'd been begging her mother for one all winter and getting boar bristle hand-me-downs instead. A bow clip for my sister. And, for Li Juan, a pair of bright red plastic earrings that cost 50 cents from a street peddler. She came into the room with her face flushed, eyes shining. Ningzi, they're so beautiful. How much were they? 50 cents. She nearly cried over 50-cent earrings. I put them on her myself, one ear at a time, and Minner clapped and said her auntie was the prettiest woman in the village. Li Juan laughed and said she looked awful, with her hair unwashed and unbathed for half a month. So that night, after my sister and Minner fell asleep in the next room, I bought a new basin from Wang Yuanden's shop, scalded it with boiling water, adjusted the temperature, and set it on the floor by the Kong. Juan, lie on the edge. Let your hair hang down. I'll wash it. She stared at me with her big dark eyes. Then she lay back. I worked the shampoo through her matted hair with my fingertips, slowly, carefully. She called my name once, softly, then said nothing, just closed her eyes and let me wash. I leaned down and kissed her. Ningzi, she whispered. I know you want to, but it's not possible now. Juan, I didn't mean that. Does it hurt? She nodded. 2 weeks postpartum, she'd been too embarrassed to tell anyone about the itching and pain. Not her sister, not me. She'd endured it in silence, because that was what village women did. Suffer quietly and hope it passed. I told her to prepare a sample on cotton. Tomorrow, I'd take it to the county hospital myself. She buried her face in my chest and cried. Not from pain, from the kind of intimacy she'd never known a man could offer. After I dried her hair by the stove and washed her feet, we lay together on the kang. She whispered, Ningzi, do you remember 4 years ago when you kissed me at Aunt May's house and I made a scene? I grinned. If I hadn't tricked you into that kiss, you wouldn't be lying here complaining. If I'd known you were a village thug, I never would have married you. Juan, do you regret it? A long silence. I don't regret it now. The next morning, I drove the tractor to the county hospital, carrying a crumpled piece of paper in my pocket. The female doctor stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Where is the patient? Doctor, she gave birth 15 days ago. It's below 0 outside. I brought the specimen instead. I slid a red envelope into her drawer. Dr. Kui shook her head, wrote the prescription anyway, then opened the drawer and handed the envelope back. If your wife has more problems, come find me. My surname is Kui, a good doctor. In my first life, I'd never once taken any woman to a hospital. I'd never met an obstetrician. Now I had one on file for the future. At the pig farm, I paid Han Yukin the 700 yuan I owed, and he told me Aunt May's red mule had been stolen overnight from his yard. My legs went soft. The mule I'd borrowed, left as collateral, gone. But I swallowed the panic and negotiated. Lend me the tractor a few more days. I'll sell your piglets and mine. If the mule turns up, no harm done. If not, I'll earn enough to compensate. Han Yukin agreed. He had 200 piglets trapped by the December snow with no buyers. I was his only way out. I loaded 100 piglets and 3 black and white television sets onto the tractor. Each Changfeng TV cost 520 yuan, 1,560 total, more than most families in this region earned in a year. 3 TVs, one for my house, one for my sister's family in Xiaoshui village, one for Aunt May. I drove to Xiaoshui first, sold 50 piglets along the way, dropped a TV at my brother-in-law's door with 100 yuan in Bai-Bai's pocket, and drove back to Shilapu by 4 in the afternoon. In 1992, a television in a remote mountain village was not a luxury. It was a revolution. Aunt May's kids, Xuanwan and Yongyang, had been scolded by the village chief's wife for watching TV at her house all day. Now they had their own screen. I installed the antenna on a poplar rafter, pulled the cable through a gap under the eaves, and tuned it until CCTV1 came in clear. Journey to the West flickered onto the screen. The children went silent. Grandfather, sitting on the edge of the Kong in my house after I installed ours, stared at Sun Wukong with his white beard trembling and his mouth slightly open. Li Juan forgot to nurse Yue Yue. My sister forgot to make dumplings. I cooked dinner by myself, carried plates of noodles into the room, and they ate without once looking away from the screen. I was stunned watching them eat, one by one. Even the puppy barked in protest. Television, I decided, was a magnificent and terrible invention. That night, idle villagers packed Aunt May's house to watch the evening news. Zhang Aibo's father sat eating my apples in her living room. I blocked him at the door on my way out. Uncle Zhang, you watch TV all afternoon, eat my aunt's food, now you're eating my apples? Go home. He left, cursing. But the message traveled. He Ning buys the TV. He Ning buys the apples. He Ning decides who watches. The TV wasn't generosity. It was strategic positioning. The house with the television became the center of village life, and I controlled who came through the door. But business doesn't wait for Journey to the West. Government official Mao shut down my piglet operation 3 days early, seizing 200 head from the market. I'd planned to earn 5,000 yuan. The real number landed at 2,300, 2,000 short. Aunt May's mule was still lost. The compensation still unearned. I didn't panic. In my first life, I'd watched commodity prices for 30 years. I knew which goods were available, when, and at what margins. Oil residue. Every village family that bought a piglet needed pork fat cracklings to fatten it. The oil mill in town had 5,000 caddies sitting in storage because the December snow had blocked every delivery truck. I drove straight to Boss Cheng. He wanted 8 cents per caddy. I offered 5. We settled on 6, plus 10 caddies of pure fragrant sesame oil for my sister's cooking. Then, I discovered his cellar held 5,000 caddies of red apples, going soft in the warming weather, trucks unable to reach them since December. I bought those too. I hauled oil residue and apples to the mining area, sold everything for cash at double the price, drove back, loaded more, sold to my own village. I used the village chief's loudspeaker to announce my goods 3 times a day, and I refused every request for credit. Auntie, it's not the Lantern Festival yet. No credit. I'd hand them 2 free apples with a grin, then stand there until they found the 10 yuan in their pockets. I was relentless, because before the new year, when my family was starving, not one of these aunties had asked Li Juan a single kind word. Aunt Pang tried to steal piglets twice without paying. I caught her both times. The second night, I climbed her courtyard wall, counted 2 piglets in her sty, walked into her house, ate her husband's roasted potato chips, and collected 50 yuan, plus kept the 10 yuan change as a penalty for making me come collect. Zhang's 3 cousins visited grandfather. They brought a box of instant noodles and spoke loudly to the old man for 2 minutes. But the visit wasn't for him. It was for me. Half a month of grinding labor had earned something I couldn't buy: respect from the most prestigious family in the village. Li Juan asked me that night, eyes wide, "Ningzi, are we the richest people in the village?" I stared at her. We had 2,000 yuan, 3 TVs we couldn't resell, a lost mule to compensate, and a 10,000 yuan house to build, richest in the village. My wife was dreaming with her eyes open. Then the minivan came, birth control enforcement, a van full of town officials who grabbed women with unauthorized pregnancies and took them for forced procedures. They pulled Li Dongwai's wife from her own doorstep, dragged her by the arms while she sat on the ground, too terrified to scream. Li Dongwei pointed at the TV antenna in my yard, told Director Lin to take my wife too. I heard the van, saw 2 men and a woman walking toward my gate, picked up a shovel and met them 50 meters out. "Stop. What are you doing?" Comrade Xiaochang recognized me. The village drunk turned tractor driver. "He Ning, put down that shovel. The 500 yuan deposit I paid on the 7th day of the Lunar New Year. Does it only last 3 days?" They knew nothing about the deposit. Their own temporary worker, Cadre Xiao Du, had collected my money and never reported it. I took out the receipt, struck a match in the cold, dark air, and read the numbers aloud by firelight. I did not hand it over. You don't give your only receipt to the man who wants to take your wife. "Director Lin, I have this receipt. How dare you harass my wife? I'll take this to the county." They left. My sister came out trembling. She'd been through it. She knew what that van was for. "Ningzi, they've already left?" I hugged her. "Sis, don't tell Juan. She doesn't need to know they came." The receipt saved Li Juan. My foresight from the 7th day had worked, but I didn't sleep that night. Receipts expire. The system keeps coming. The morning after the van, I found children's footprints circling the tractor. The day before, someone had stolen my crank handle, costing me an hour of delay. Now someone had poured water into the fuel tank. The diesel wouldn't ignite. I drained the tank, separated the water from the fuel, fixed the engine, and studied the footprints. I knew those shoes. 2 days later, at the apple selling spot in the river bend, I asked 5-year-old Li Dongdong directly, "Kid, you stole my crank handle, didn't you?" He tilted his head, considering. "Give me 2 yuan. Tell me who told you, and I'll pay. My aunt told me to steal it. Last night, water got into my fuel tank. You poured it? My aunt told me to pour it." Wang Qin, my second aunt. The woman whose hair I'd pulled in front of the whole village. She'd used a 5-year-old as her weapon, a child manipulated by $1, a bowl of dinner, and permission to watch Sun Wukong at her house every evening. Li Dongdong's father beat the boy when I told him, slapped him, kicked him until he collapsed on the ground screaming. In my first life, this boy would beat classmates bloody, steal watermelon money, and spend 8 years in prison. But the boy wasn't the threat. Wang Qin was. I watched her house from a distance that evening as she came and went, and felt the pattern clicking into place. A stolen crank handle, water in a fuel tank. Each act bolder than the last. She was escalating, and I knew, with 30 years of watching this woman, that she never stopped at sabotage. The community rallied around us that week, and I could feel the village shifting beneath my feet like thawing ground. I hauled coal for Uncle He Baoyan, 4 loads of manure to his fields with the tractor. I drove oil residue and apples to every household that had cash or grain to trade. Women brought corn and black melon seeds in burlap sacks and exchanged them for my goods at the river bend. By the end of the week, our storeroom held 5 bags of corn, 2 bags of wheat, and 30 caddies of melon seeds. We didn't have money, but we had food for months. The village chief announced my goods over the loudspeaker 3 times. He Bao promised free labor for when I built the house. He was a bricklayer, the best in the village, and his pledge was worth more than money. 2 women from the Li family started saving grain specifically to trade for my spring vegetables. The Zhang cousins came to visit grandfather again, and this time they stayed for tea. The village was changing, not because of money, because of what money represented. For 3 years, I'd been the village drunk, the shame, the man whose wife everybody pitied. Now I was the man with the tractor, the television, the apples, the oil residue, the man who bought things for his aunt's family before his own, the man who washed his wife's feet. Li Hongmei told me what the village women were saying behind my back. Li Juan is the luckiest woman in the village. Li Juan, the woman who'd married a thug and spent 4 years regretting it. Lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt hunted. Every morning, I checked the tractor for sabotage. Every evening, I checked grandfather's food. Every time I left the house, I told my sister the same thing. Watch grandpa. She'd roll her eyes. Ningzi, you keep saying that like something bad is going to happen to him. I couldn't explain. In my first life, something bad did happen to him. On the 8th day of this month, he died in Wang Qin's house. Nobody noticed for hours. In this life, grandfather strolled the village road with his hands behind his back, visited the Zhao family next door, ate bowls of gray bean noodles, and tried to drag old men to our house to watch TV. He handed out my apples to anyone who stopped to talk. Half a bag gone before I caught him. Grandpa, stop giving away my inventory. He laughed, his white beard trembling. The back scratcher I'd bought him was tucked into his belt like a sword. He was alive. He was happy. He was 83 years old and eating poached eggs every morning, sleeping on a warm Kong, watching Sun Wukong every evening with his great-grandson. That was worth more than half a bag of apples. The mule led me 60 miles from home. I traced it through village gossip to Moshui, where Yang Biao, my old drinking buddy, the mirror of what I would have stayed, had intercepted the animal on the road after it escaped from Han Yukin's farm and sold it to a local family called Lu for 500 yuan. I found Yang Biao at a funeral reception for grandfather's younger sister, an 80-year-old woman whose death had brought the extended family together. Yang Biao wasn't mourning. He was in the side room, shaking bowls and betting cash, a cigarette dangling from his lips, 500 yuan of mule money burning through his pockets. I walked through the crowd of mourners, pushed past the gamblers, grabbed him by the collar, and cracked the tractor crank handle across the side of his head. He ran. I chased him half an hour through the village streets, across frozen fields, through alleyways. He was faster than me, but I was angrier. I caught him in a sandy clearing, pinned him face down, and dragged him to the Lu family's gate. Get the mule back, or I hand you to Director Luo. You'll share a cell with Yang Biao. He tried. The Lu woman refused, so I walked straight into her yard, past her protests, into the mule pen, called the Red Mule by name, and let it out by the bridle. He family, this is robbery. He stole my mule and sold it to you. Take it up with him. I asked village chief He Fuyan, who was attending the same funeral, to lead the mule 50 miles home while I drove the tractor on a different route. But the Lu family had 5 brothers, and they chased He Fuyan on bicycles. They caught him on the road, punched him in the chest, kicked him on the ground, and took the mule back. An hour later, driving the tractor with a load of coal, I met them coming the opposite direction. 3 bicycles, 5 men, 1 mule. They surrounded me. Lu Hongxing punched me in the chest. I went down to a squat, clutching my ribs. I let them hit me first. That was important. Then I pulled the flathead screwdriver from my coat sleeve and drove it into Lu Hongxing's thigh. 2 more swings, 2 more thighs, 3 men screaming on the ground in under 5 seconds. The other 2 backed off, eyes locked on the blood-dripping tool in my hand. I walked past them, took the mule's reins from the 1 man still holding them. He let go without a fight, mounted the mule, and trotted after the village chief at a leisurely pace, the screwdriver still warm in my fist. Behind me, Lu Hongxing groaned from the ground. His brother wanted to smash the tractor. Lu Hongxing stopped him, even bleeding from his thigh. He had enough sense to know the truth. Yang Biao had stolen the mule and sold it to them. They'd been wrong from the start. My screwdriver just made the point faster than words. He Fuyan's eyes were the size of the mule's when I caught up to him. Ningxi, you got the mule back from 5 men? I reasoned with them, uncle. We're all relatives. He didn't believe a word, but he led the mule the remaining 30 miles home, and I turned around, jogged back to the tractor, and drove it to the village. I unloaded half a cart of coal at his gate as compensation for his bruised ribs and his bruised dignity. Was the screwdriver justified? The mule was borrowed. The promise was mine. In 1992, rural China, 60 miles from the nearest police station, disputes over livestock are settled between the parties involved. The screwdriver was what I had. The thigh was where I aimed. Cripple, don't kill. That was the code. But the audience can decide whether that was honor or insanity. I know what it was. It was debt. I owed Aunt May that mule, and I pay my debts in whatever currency the situation demands. The tractor went back to Han Yukon. He showed up at my gate one evening, having bicycled 2 hours from the county, convinced I'd stolen his vehicle. Government official Mao had gotten in his ear, told him I was a village hoodlum running a scam. The pig farm owner was ready to call the police. I sat him down at our dinner table, fed him 3 bowls of noodles, 2 bowls of Aunt May's pork bone soup, and a full cup of hot tea. Li Juan sliced apples. I let him eat until his anger softened into embarrassment. Then he said it. Brother He Ning, I must take the tractor tonight. Uncle Chin, if you'd said that before the noodles, I wouldn't have given you the bone soup. He laughed despite himself. I gave him the tractor keys, sold him my remaining 2,000 caddies of oil residue and 1,000 caddies of apples at cost, and collected 100 yuan for the market intelligence. Uncle Chin, what's the most valuable thing in business? Information? You're paying for what I know. He drove off in the dark. The tractor's clatter faded into the distance, and suddenly, our yard was quiet. No engine, no diesel smell, just the sound of wind and the puppy scratching at the door. Without the tractor, my income collapsed overnight. No long-distance trading, no oil residue runs to the mining area, no apple deliveries. The 5,000 yuan goal was a fantasy. I sat on the Kang that night and did the math in my head. 10,000 yuan for a proper house. I had barely over 2. I didn't even own a bicycle. Li Hongmei came by to comfort me. Ningxi, take a few days off. Start again after the Lantern Festival. I couldn't rest, but I couldn't trade without wheels either. So I pivoted to the land. Aunt May, have the kids bring over their old notebooks and workbooks. What do you need old books for? Growing vegetables. In less than 10 minutes, Xuan and Yang ran over carrying a towering stack of notebooks. I showed them how to tear out pages and roll them into tight paper tubes, 1 seed per tube. The idea was simple, but the knowledge behind it came from 20 years in the future. Fill the tubes with soil, plant vegetable seeds, and let them sprout inside the house where the stove kept the temperature above freezing. 10 days later, transplant the tubes into a leveled garden bed covered with plastic sheeting. The paper would decompose. The seedlings would already have a head start. We'd harvest bok choy and Chinese cabbage a full month before any other family in the village. The mining area was desperate for fresh greens in early spring. I'd make a small fortune just walking the produce there by hand if I had to. Greenhouse farming, knowledge from decades ahead, applied to 1992 paper and dirt. That evening, Xuan, Yang, grandfather, Li Juan, and I sat in a circle around the warm stove, rolling paper tubes, while potato slices roasted on the iron lid. The room smelled like burning coal and baking potatoes. Grandfather's thin fingers worked slowly but steadily. Li Juan hummed. The kids competed over who could roll faster. It felt like a kindergarten craft project, the most peaceful evening I could remember. Li Juan looked at me curiously. Ningxi, how do you know how to grow vegetables in paper tubes? A neighbor taught me once. She didn't press. She never pressed. And I was grateful because the real answer, that I'd learned it from a farming show in 2015 while sitting in a concrete apartment missing every person in this room, wasn't something I could explain. Wen woke from his nap, squatted under the altar table, and tore half the finished tubes to shreds. I picked him up, kissed his forehead, and started rolling more. He grabbed a tube and tried to roll one himself, his fat little fingers crushing the paper into a ball. Good job, son. Li Juan snatched it from him. He's destroying them. He's 3. He's doing his best. That night, I carried Wen to Wang Wanden's shop to buy balloons. On the way back, I passed Wang Qin, coming out of the same shop. I asked the shopkeeper what she'd bought. Rat poison. I stopped walking. Wen tugged my collar and pointed at the balloons. Dad, balloons! I carried my son home and tied 5 balloons to the doorframe, but I filed that purchase away in the back of my mind. Wang Qin, rat poison. 2 words that sat together like a match and a fuse. Then came the chicken soup. This is the part I need you to understand. After everything, the loan sharks, the robbers, the highway gang, the birth control officials, the 5 Liu brothers, the thing that nearly killed my family was a bowl of broth. Village chief He Fuyan had been lecturing my second uncle for days, shaming him in that quiet way village chiefs have, where every sentence ends with, "Think about how this looks." He told him to visit his father openly, to bring food, to show the villagers he wasn't the monster everyone whispered about, and something in He Guomen finally cracked. He killed a chicken that night. He was angry at Wang Qin, angry at himself, angry at the village chief for being right. He grabbed a cleaver from the kitchen, strode to the chicken coop, seized a hen, and chopped its head off in one stroke. The headless bird thrashed across the yard. Wang Qin watched from the doorway, rigid and silent. He Guomen scalded the feathers himself, gutted it himself, stewed it all night on the coal stove, the pot bubbling until dawn. Wang Qin didn't say a single sarcastic word, not one complaint about wasting a chicken on the old man. She just watched. That alone should have told me something was wrong. Wang Qin had never been silent about anything in her life. Her silence wasn't acceptance, it was calculation. In the morning, He Guomen scooped a bowl of soup and carried it to our house while I was out buying a hen from the Zhang family. Li Juan let him in. He placed the soup on the table, told grandfather to drink it at lunch, and left. My wife heated it on the stove. She was about to taste it for salt when I walked through the door. I'd come back early. I'd left my money on the Kang. Ningzi, your second uncle brought chicken soup for Grandpa. My blood went cold. 2 nights ago, I'd been in Wang Wanden's shop buying balloons for Wen Wen. Wang Qin had just walked out. I'd asked the shopkeeper what she bought. Rat poison. I'd filed it away, the way you file away the click of a gun being cocked in the next room. Juan, don't give this to grandfather. Throw it away. Ningzi, you're being ridiculous. How could second aunt poison grandpa? She wishes he were dead. She's wished it for years. I saw her buy rat poison 2 days ago. Li Juan stared at me like I was insane. And maybe I was. Maybe the soup was perfectly clean. Maybe He Guomen had really just wanted to make his father a bowl of chicken broth, but I couldn't test it on Heizi. Wen Wen would lose his mind if the puppy died. Couldn't test it on the neighbor's dog. Couldn't take the risk of feeding it to an 83-year-old man, or to my nursing wife, or to a toddler who put everything in his mouth. So I did something else. I picked up the bowl, carried it to He Guomen's house, walked into the empty kitchen, and poured the soup back into the pot on the stove. Then I hid the bowl in the haystack and left. If it was clean, nothing would happen. If it wasn't, whoever ate from that pot next would prove it. Wang Qin came out of the side room dressed in new clothes. She went into the kitchen, ladled herself a generous helping of chicken soup, ate it with steamed buns, and pushed her bicycle out of the village. She passed me in the river bend. I shouted her name. She wobbled and fell off the bicycle, but it wasn't my shout that knocked her down. The poison was already working. She lay on the ground clutching her stomach, foaming at the mouth, her body convulsing in the dirt. Zhang Fuxiang ran over with soapy water and forced it down her throat. The poison she'd put in her husband's chicken soup, the poison meant for my grandfather, was eating through her own guts. I threw down the chicken I was carrying, grabbed Wang Qin's bicycle, and pedaled to the town police station. Chief Luo, they poisoned the chicken soup. They tried to kill my grandfather, my wife, and my children. Director Luo sent 4 officers in a squad car. He Guomen had already run to our house. He burst through the gate, wild-eyed, screaming at Li Juan. The chicken soup! Don't eat it! It's poison! Wang Qin poisoned it! Li Juan turned white as paper. Second uncle, did you know? He didn't answer. He ran inside. Grandfather was on the Kong, watching television. Wen Wen was under the altar table, tearing paper tubes to pieces. Both alive, both untouched. He Guomen sagged against the doorframe, legs failing. His father looked up at him from the Kang with mild curiosity. The old man had no idea how close he'd come. The police car arrived. Officers loaded Wang Qin's convulsing body. He Guomen was taken in for questioning, whether he'd known about the poison or been an unwitting carrier. That was for Director Luo to sort out. I punched my second uncle 3 times in the face before they pulled me off. Hey Guomen, you served poisoned soup to my grandfather, to my wife and children. He took it, didn't raise his hands, didn't fight back, just stood there with blood running from his nose. I ran home. I was screaming before I reached the gate. Juan, Wen, where are you? Li Juan came out from the back passage where she'd been feeding the piglets. Ningzi, I'm here, don't panic. I grabbed her, held her so tight she couldn't breathe, kissed her cheek in front of my cousin and the village chief, and I didn't care who was watching. You're all right, Grandpa's all right, Wen's all right. She pushed me back. My cousin is at the door. I didn't hear her. I grabbed the village chief by the collar instead. Uncle, get on the loudspeaker, right now. Tell the whole village what Wang Qin did. Every household, every name. Zhang Fuxiang pried my hand away. Calm down. The police have them. It's over. It wasn't over. Not inside me. I wanted Wang Qin dead. I said it out loud. I screamed it until Li Juan grabbed my arms and held on. But she was alive. My wife was alive. My grandfather was alive. My son was under a table, happily destroying paper tubes, oblivious to the fact that a bowl of soup had nearly ended everything I'd fought for since the day I came back. I'd fought loan sharks with iron forks, beaten robbers on frozen mountain roads, stabbed 3 men with a screwdriver over a borrowed mule. But the deadliest weapon in my entire story was a ladle. Wang Qin's chicken soup, meant for an old man who just wanted to be warm. After the loan sharks and the robbers and the gang fights, the thing that nearly killed my family was domestic, quiet, carried in a bowl by a man who thought he was doing something good. I sat on the Kang that night, holding Wen while he slept. His small fist clutched my collar. His breathing was slow and trusting, the way only a child who feels safe can breathe. Li Juan nursed Yue in the kitchen, her back against the wall, one hand cupping the baby's head. She hadn't said a word since the village chief explained what happened. She didn't need to. I could see it in the set of her jaw, in the way she pulled Yue closer to her chest, as if the world had narrowed to the space she could cover with her own body. Grandfather snored in the next room. He still didn't know. He would never know. I'd make sure of that. All alive, all breathing, all untouched by the soup that sat on our stove for 20 minutes before I carried it back to the house it came from. 20 minutes. That was the margin. If I hadn't forgotten my money on the Kong. If I'd been 10 minutes later coming home. If Li Juan had tasted it for salt, the way she always did. Wang Qin's trajectory was finally clear. Resentment in phase 3 when I took grandfather. Humiliation in phase 4 when I pulled her hair. Sabotage in this phase through a stolen crank handle and water in a fuel tank. And now, attempted murder through a bowl of chicken soup delivered by her own husband. Each escalation followed logically from the last, and each was harder to see coming than the one before. I understood, finally, the shape of the danger I'd been fighting all along. It was never the outsiders. It was never the loan sharks, or the officials, or the highway robbers. The real threat lived next door. It shared our blood. It wore a familiar face and carried soup. The man who could fight anyone had nearly lost his family to a ladle. That was the horror. That was the truth of domestic violence that no fist can solve. That was the part that broke me. Wang Qin survived. Director Luo's officers pulled her from the town clinic 2 days after the gastric lavage, strapped to a bed, conscious and silent. She confessed everything: the rat poison, the timing, the ladle she used to scoop it into the basin while He Guomin was out of the room. 1 minute. That was all it took. 1 minute of her husband's absence, and she'd tried to kill my grandfather, my wife, my son, and my daughter with a bowl of chicken soup. The investigation closed fast. Wang Qin acted alone. He Guomin had been an unwitting carrier, a man who killed a chicken and stewed it all night because the village chief pressured him into caring for his own father, and whose wife turned that gesture into a murder weapon. Director Luo's officers came back to Shilipu with a statement for me to sign. I asked one question: Wang Qin is dead? Saved. She confessed. Sign this. I signed. My hand shook, not from guilt, from the image I couldn't erase. Li Juan standing in the kitchen, warming that pot of soup on the stove, about to ladle it into a bowl for my grandfather. If I'd left the house 5 minutes earlier that morning, if I'd forgotten something different instead of my money pouch, if I hadn't seen Wang Qin at the shop buying rat poison the day before. The village chief explained the whole story to anyone who asked. Within a day, everyone in Shilipu knew. Within 3 days, every relative in the county knew. Wang Qin, the aunt who smiled and cooked and controlled her household with an iron whisper, had tried to poison an 83-year-old man through his grandson's kitchen. I sat on the kang that evening, holding Wen, feeding him rice with a spoon. Li Juan placed meat in my bowl without speaking. Yue nursed quietly. Grandfather snored in the next room, unaware of how close he'd come. The deadliest threat was never the loan shark with his thugs, or the robbers on the mountain road, or the traffickers on motorcycles. It was a ladle, a bowl, an aunt next door. I could fight anyone. I nearly lost everything to soup. Life reassembled itself the way it always does in a village, slowly, stubbornly, with small absurdities, pushing the darkness aside. A peddler named Zhang arrived the next morning, shaking a rattle drum from one end of the village to the other. He sold needles, thread, hair clips, toy guns, and small packets of egg candy for a cent each. I bought 10 packets and handed them out to the children crowded around his carrying pole. Little Yang, Aunt May's boy, ignored the candy. His eyes were locked on a toy revolver. I bought 3, 1 for Wen, 2 for Yang and his brother, 3 yuan. The peddler grinned as if he'd robbed me. Then I noticed something. Zhang, the peddler, was selling sheep dung. He'd scooped the last of his red food coloring from the bottle. Then, when the next woman looked away, he'd pick a sheep dung ball off the ground, crush it between his fingers, and mix it into the empty bottle. 1 cent per spoonful. Sheep dung, sold as coloring for steamed buns. I caught his eye. Zhang the peddler, quite the businessman. His smile vanished. I told him I'd drag every woman in the village back to inspect her red dye, unless he sold me his rattle drum. 5 yuan. 5 yuan can't buy this drum? I turned toward the Li family temple and cupped my hands around my mouth. 5 yuan and your secret dies with me. He shoved the drum at me like it burned his hands. Wen banged it all the way home, off rhythm, delighted, while Li Juan stared at me from the doorway, wondering how I'd talked a peddler out of his livelihood. Some days, the comedy is all that keeps you upright. I secured the mutton trade with the Hui miners the following week. Ma Chang and his wife agreed. No one else's lamb gets into the neighborhood unless it carries a note in my handwriting. I brought cigarettes, tea, and my full respect. Ma Qiang shook my hand with coal-black fingers and called me little rascal, with a warmth I hadn't earned yet but intended to. It was on that trip to the mining production area that I saw him again. Pisan, the fugitive Hu Xiangdong, hiding under a fake name in a bungalow for temporary miners, digging coal under someone else's identity. I recognized the bulbous nose instantly. In my first life, I saw his wanted poster at a bus stop the day I walked out of the detention center. 10,000 yuan reward. He wasn't caught for 3 more months, but I knew where he was now. I said nothing, filed it away, walked out with Ma Chang's wife, ate 3 fried dough sticks on the road, and started counting the days. On the way home, 2 beggars entered my courtyard. Middle-aged men with dog-beating sticks who'd already shaken Li Juan down for noodles and steamed buns and now wanted money. I grabbed my iron fork and chased them out. They ran, but they didn't look scared. They looked like men who'd be back. Later that afternoon, riding my bicycle from my sister's house in Xiaoshui village, I heard a motorcycle coming up behind me, fast. A child coughed, faint, muffled, wrong. The memory hit me like a fist. In my first life, a child went missing from Xiaoshui village and was never found. 8 years, 10 years, gone. The motorcycle was about to pass me. The 2 passengers were the same beggars from my yard. I didn't think. I had a shovel handle tied to the crossbar. I raised it level with my eyebrows and swung as the motorcycle roared past. The handle cracked across the driver's forehead. The bike tilted, plowed into the soft plowed field, and went down. A 3-year-old boy tumbled out, crying. Both men scrambled up and ran for the mountains. I didn't chase them. I had the child. I had their motorcycle. The boy couldn't tell me his name, couldn't stop crying. I rode the motorcycle to Xiaoshui village and handed him to Uncle Zhang Mao at the village entrance. Dongping's brother-in-law, you've saved their whole family's lives. I took the motorcycle home, an almost new machine, confiscated from child traffickers. My first motor vehicle, but I knew they'd come for it. Men like that don't lose a motorcycle and a payday without looking for payback. That night, after Li Juan and the children fell asleep, I dressed in my heavy sheepskin coat and climbed the hilltop behind the house. Knife at my waist, slingshot in my pocket, iron shovel in my hand. I squatted in the cold and waited. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, nothing. At 2:30, a shadow climbed up from the river bend. One man, carrying a white plastic bucket. He tried the iron gate I'd installed that very morning. Locked. He circled to the haystack against the east wall, climbed up, and started throwing straw down into the courtyard to cushion his landing. Then, he opened the bucket and poured gasoline onto the straw piled under my kitchen window. Gasoline, where my wife slept, where my daughter nursed. I came off the hilltop like something unhinged, grabbed him from behind, covered his mouth, stabbed him in the buttock, then the thigh, pressed the blade against his throat. If you shout, I'll stab you in the neck. In my own yard, killing an arsonist makes me a hero. Li Juan's light flicked on inside. I shielded the scene with my coat and called out calmly, "Hey honey, just checking if I left the key in the ignition. Go back to sleep." The light went off. I tied the arsonist's hands with my slingshot cord, his feet with my belt, stuffed cotton into his mouth, and rode his motorcycle to the police station. Director Luo, I've tied up a murderer, arsonist, and child trafficker under the jujube tree in front of my house. Luo's eyes went as wide as a mule's. His officers photographed the scene while Li Juan slept. 7 or 8 members of the trafficking gang were arrested in the following days. Director Luo secured me a 500 yuan bonus and told me to make fewer enemies. I crawled into bed next to Wen Wen at dawn. He rolled over and hugged my neck without waking. I held him and stared at the ceiling until the roosters crowed. 3 days later, I was in the county seat. Below the bell and drum tower, a fresh announcement hung on the bus stop board. 10,000 yuan. Clues leading to the arrest of criminal suspect Hu Xiangdong. I rode my motorcycle straight to the county police station. The officer at the gate looked at me like I was trouble. What do you need? Director Gao, I know where Hu Xiangdong is hiding. 5 minutes later, I was in the director's office. Director Luo was already there on other business. He Ning? Director Luo, small world. Luo handed me the 500 yuan bonus he'd secured for the trafficking gang bust. I signed for it. Then I turned to Director Gao. Pisan, production area of the #1 mine. Bungalow row, left side after the gate. I'm almost certain he's Hu Xiangdong. The nose is identical to the reward poster. Director Gao picked up his phone and called the mining area police. Apprehend and identify immediately. We waited. The phone rang. Gao grabbed it. His face broke into the first smile his officers said they'd seen in years. "Good lad," he said, extending both hands. "Take the 10,000 yuan. Fingerprints confirmed. Hu Xiangdong confessed on the spot. The most wanted fugitive in the county. Caught because a farmer delivering mutton remembered a nose from a bus stop poster in another life. I stuffed 10,000 wen into my coat until my pocket bulged like a tumor. The fugitive I'd spotted weeks ago, the nose I'd recognized from a poster in another lifetime, paid off in full. I didn't buy a motorcycle. I bought a Lantuo tricycle. Wang Yuanden, the shop owner who'd been crowing all week about his new 4,800 yuan tricycle, the first motor vehicle in the village, would have to share the spotlight. Mine cost 5,800. The bigger model, diesel engine that could run for a decade. I loaded bamboo planks, straw mats, greenhouse film, 3 shovels, and the motorcycle itself onto the back of the tricycle and drove home through Yangshaogo. On the River Bend Road, I found village chief He Fuyin wobbling on a bicycle with 2 broken spokes. "Uncle Village Chief, need a ride?" He stared at the blue tricycle, then at the motorcycle strapped to the back, then at me. "Ningzi, is that Wang Yuanden's car? This is my car. Get in." He climbed onto the carriage, clutching his bicycle with one hand and the railing with the other, his heart visibly pounding through his ribs. The tricycle rumbled up through the village. Children ran behind us. The village chief waved them away like a general returning from campaign. I parked at the bottom of the slope in front of my house. The engine cut. Silence. Then Li Juan's voice from behind the iron gate. "Ningzi, whose car did you borrow this time?" She didn't believe it was ours. Couldn't believe it. I showed her the receipt, told her about the fugitive, the police reward, the 10,000 yuan. She stared at the paper in her trembling hands. "You're kidding me. I don't believe you can make 5,000 yuan from the police. I'll have Director Luo explain it to you personally." She walked around the tricycle twice, touched the carriage railing, ran her fingers along the headlight. Then she threw her arms around my neck and kissed me. I slammed my head into the courtyard wall. "Ningzi, what are you doing? I'm so dizzy from your kiss. I can't see straight." She laughed. Not a polite laugh, not a quiet laugh. Her shoulders shook and her eyes squeezed shut, and she buried her face in my chest. And for a moment, the only sound in that courtyard was Li Juan, laughing like a woman who'd just discovered that impossible things happen to people like her. Outside, Wen wailed. He'd been playing with the bamboo planks and gotten a splinter in his palm, deep. I pulled it out, and blood pooled in his little hand, and he screamed as if the world were ending. I wrapped it with a clean cloth and thread from Yui's diaper supply. His mother didn't hear him. She was still standing by the tricycle, touching the receipt, reading it again. Even the crisis felt manageable. A splinter, blood, a child's tears, all of it fixable, all of it small. We had a tricycle. We had money in our pockets. We had a front gate that locked. In a village where most families hauled manure by mule cart, my wife and I owned the only motor vehicle besides Wang Yuanden's. The man who couldn't afford meat 6 weeks ago now drove a blue Lantuo home with 10,000 yuan in his coat. He Gomin came to my courtyard the next morning. Without Wang Qin beside him, he looked like a different person, smaller, quieter. His eyes didn't slide away when I stared at him. He stood in my yard with his shoulders hunched and his hands empty and told me he was divorcing her. I'll divorce her in no less than 3 years. I couldn't believe it. These days, even long married couples could say that word, but I'd never expected to hear it from him. He knelt in front of my grandfather's room and kowtowed 3 times, wept openly, said he wanted to take his father home. I refused, flatly. Grandpa doesn't want to go. Juan and I are taking care of him. He Gomin wiped his tears and said one more thing. "Ningzi, I've invited the temple palanquin to settle my house tonight. I tore down the shed on the west side where your grandfather used to sleep. Give me a chance." He'd demolished the tiny cold shed where he'd kept his own father like a forgotten animal, built from mud and straw, leaking in the rain, freezing in winter. The place where I'd found grandfather with a blackened, unwashed face and ribs showing through his shirt, gone now, torn down with He Guomin's own hands. I didn't say yes. I said I'd think about it. He walked away, and his silhouette against the morning light looked like the loneliest man in the village. That evening, while workers ate long noodles in my kitchen after helping me level the slope for the new tricycle, He Guomin carried my grandfather out of the Zhao family's house on his own back. I wasn't there to see it. The neighbor told me afterward. He Guomin walked in, took his father's hand, and the old man's eyes filled with tears. He Wanli didn't understand everything that had happened. The poisoning, the arrest, the divorce. but he understood his son was crying, and when a father sees his son cry, something older than logic takes over. Grandfather stood up and followed him out. He Guoman bent down. 83-year-old He Ning climbed onto his son's back, the way a child rides, arms around the neck, legs dangling. He Guoman carried him home. When I arrived at the Zhao house, and Zhao Baozhong told me, I stood there for a long time. "Give your second uncle a chance," he said. "He's your grandfather's own son. You can't stand in front of that." He was right, and it hurt. Not because I'd failed. I hadn't. I'd rescued that old man from filth and neglect and near death. I'd bought him new clothes, fed him eggs every morning, sat with him while he watched Journey to the West with his white beard trembling. But I was the grandson. He Guoman was the son. A father wants his own child. When that child finally reaches back, a father goes. I walked to He Guoman's courtyard. At 10 o'clock, the palanquin arrived. 2 sedan chair bearers. Li Laoshi, the village elder, who muttered prayers no one else could understand, and Wang Jia's mute son, gripped the corners of a rectangular wooden frame wrapped in red cloth, hung with copper bells, and marked with the characters for Lao Jia, the household deity. He Guoman knelt before an offering table set in the middle of the courtyard. Incense smoke curled upward. Yellow paper money burned in a tin basin. The bells jingled as the carriers rocked the palanquin in circles around the kneeling man. The neighbors crowded through the gate to watch. I stood at the back, arms crossed, skeptical of every particle of incense ash floating through the cold air. Li Laoshi's muttering rose to a sharp cry. "Gotcha! One safe and sound. Great fortune." A porcelain bowl flew from his arms and landed upright on the corner of the courtyard wall without breaking. A ghost caught and sealed. The fat aunt beside me whispered, "A bowl covered by a ghost can't break." I muttered, "Sure it can't." She punched my arm. The palanquin swayed out of the house, around the courtyard, into the kitchen, and back out. Li Laoshi's chanting grew louder. The crowd followed the 2 carriers to the back of the main house, and another bowl flew up onto the roof and landed there, perfectly balanced. 2 ghosts, caught and contained. I knew what was in the bowls. Blood smeared on the inside before the ritual, a trick as old as the village itself. 49 days from now, someone would lift the lid and find dark stains, and call it proof that the ghost had dissolved. But I didn't say that, because standing in that courtyard, watching He Guoman kneel with a strip of red cloth around his neck and tears drying on his face, with my grandfather sitting in the warm upper room of a house that had been cleansed, I understood that the ghosts being caught were not supernatural. They were the cruelty, the neglect, the years of Wang Qin's whispered control, the cowardice of a son who let his wife starve his father, the drunk driving, the poisoning, all of it, trapped in porcelain bowls and sealed with yellow paper. Li Laoshi muttered one final phrase, and this time I heard it clearly. Of all virtues, filial piety is the most important. He Guoman's head touched the ground. The palanquin was placed gently on the offering table. The bells went silent. I stepped forward and asked Li Laoshi for a red cloth strip of my own. He grumbled, but I took it. Along with a copper bell I yanked from the palanquin frame before anyone could stop me. I stuffed them both into my pocket. Then I went into the house where my grandfather sat on the warm Kong of the upper room, the main room, not the shed, not the cold corner, wrapped in the silk-padded clothes I'd bought him, his white beard clean, his watery eyes blinking in the lantern light. "Grandpa, are you okay here?" He grabbed my arm. His grip was weak but insistent. "Ningxi, come see your grandpa often. Every day, Grandpa." I live 30 meters away. I kissed the top of his head. His hair smelled like the soap Li Juan used to wash it. Outside, the crowd dispersed. He Guoman stood alone in his courtyard, the offering table still smoking, the bowls sealed on the wall and the roof. He looked at me as I walked through his gate. I stopped. "Second uncle, if you're good to him, truly good. I won't say another word." He nodded. "Just once." I walked home under a sky thick with stars. The copper bell clinked in my pocket with each step. The red cloth strip brushed against my fingers. Li Juan had left the iron gate unlocked for me. The kitchen light was off. In the next room, Wen slept with his bandaged hand curled against his chest. Yue breathed in soft, steady pulls beside her mother. I stood on the doorstep and looked at my small courtyard. The earthen walls with their peeling plaster, the new iron gate, the blue Lantuo tricycle gleaming faintly in the starlight, a motorcycle strapped to its back, bamboo planks stacked against the wall, straw mats for the greenhouse, seed trays lined up inside, ready to sprout. In my first life, I died in a hospital bed at 50. My son stood over me and said, "I won't acknowledge you as my father." I screamed his name across whatever void separates the living from the dead. He didn't turn around. Now, in this life, my son calls me good dad. He runs toward me when I come through the gate. He sleeps with his arms around my neck and his face pressed against my chest. My daughter is alive. Yue, who never drew a single breath in the first timeline, has chubby cheeks and enormous dark eyes and a cry that could wake 3 villages. My wife is warm and fed and safe behind a locked iron gate, and she kissed me today of her own choosing. She said, "I don't regret it now." She meant it. My grandfather sleeps 30 meters away in a warm room, in the care of a son who finally decided to be a son. Wang Qin is in prison. Yang Biao is in prison. The traffickers are in prison. The fugitive is in prison. Zhang Aibo is a cautionary tale wandering the margins. The robbers are broken. The debts are paid. The tractor is returned and replaced by something better. I reached into my pocket and held the copper bell. The metal was cold and smooth. The ghosts are caught. All of them. Every one. Not in porcelain bowls maybe. Not by chanting and incense. But caught all the same. In the choices I made, the fights I fought, the nights I froze on mountaintops, the mornings I washed my wife's hair and cooked my son's breakfast and carried my grandfather home on my back. The story began with a dead man screaming across the void. It ends with a living man standing in his own yard, quiet, settled, complete, holding a copper bell that will never ring again. I went inside. I lay down beside my wife. I closed my eyes. Anyway,